The Roman root of Greece. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 126, Change. Before the war broke out, Edmund Pasha, in front of Sultan Hamid, swore that the great Ottoman Empire would teach the Greek dwarfs a hard lesson. Although the Ottoman Empire is crumbling and has suffered repeated defeats, its national strength is also declining. To be able to maintain the existence of the empire is only the need to maintain the balance of the European political structure. However, before this war, the empire's opponents were traditional European powers, such as Russia and Austria-Hungary. Greece, such a small country, is really not in the eyes of the Ottomans. The Ottomans have a psychological advantage over Greece. You must know that it took only a few decades for Greece to become independent from the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire still rules millions of Greeks to this day. What kind of powerful battle can those cowardly Greeks have? However, the development of the war situation was not as expected. Less than 3 days after the start of the war, not only did the front line fall into a passive state, but also asked for assistance from the rear. Edmund Pasha was really ashamed, and he was ashamed to talk about the idea of dispatching troops from the rear. Seeing the hesitant Edmund Pasha, gets persuaded, the front-line army has fallen into a passive state. If we don't immediately mobilize the troops in the rear to provide support, will we see the front-line troops fail miserably at the hands of the Greeks? After pondering for a moment, Edmund gritted his teeth. The situation on the front line could not be delayed, and said, "Then mobilize the troops stationed in Thessaloniki. They are the closest to the front line." The closest army to the Thessaly-Macedonian front is the defensive army stationed in the Thessaloniki area, a division with about 15,000 men. The second is the 26,000-strong defensive army in the city of Ioannina, the capital of northern Epirus. It was just that the Ottoman army of Ioannina, after the war, was pinned down by 16,000 men of the Greek Epirus army, and supported the Macedonian army flawlessly. Hearing Edmund's plan, Gauls instinctively felt that something was wrong. Thessaloniki was very important. It was an important fulcrum of the Ottoman Empire in the Balkans, and it was also the rear of the Macedonian legion, with the convenience of a transportation hub and a safe distance of 100 kilometers behind the front line. Thessaloniki city became a transit point for the supply of logistics supplies of the frontline army. After the outbreak of the war, the materials brought by the Ottoman Empire from Asia Minor passed the route of the Constantinople Thessaloniki Macedonian front line to supply the frontline army. Therefore, after the outbreak of the war, even though Thessaloniki, which is 100 kilometers away from the front line, is actually very safe, the Ottoman legion still stationed an army of reorganization divisions here, just to prevent and ensure that Thessalonians. The card is absolutely safe. Edmund Pasha decided to mobilize troops from Thessaloniki to assist the front line, and he mobilized a division of troops, which almost completely evacuated the guards of Thessaloniki city. Seeing the embarrassed expression on the face of the German advisor Gauls, Edmund explained, "The front line is in critical condition. This is also an expedient measure. Let's ease the tension on the front line first." Edmund Pasha said with a frown, "I will immediately ask your majesty for help, and ask his majesty to mobilize the garrison forces near Thrace and Constantinople to make up for the defense of Thessaloniki. Even so, the defensive strength of Thessaloniki city will be vacant for more than 10 days. Gets secretly said, "Just thinking about it, there really is no better way right now." It was a tacit acceptance of Edmund Pasha's plan. Thessaloniki city. On November 26, the commander of the Ottoman Empire's Thessaloniki garrison, Ouz Pasha, after receiving the order of the frontline command, ordered the army to urgently gather on the same day, count the supplies, and prepare to support the Macedonian legion and put it into battle the next morning. At the gate of the city of Thessaloniki, there was a long line of Thessaloniki troops. The soldiers walked in neat steps and formed a neat array. Ouz Pasha, it seems that he intends to show off the mighty force of the Ottoman Empire to deter the annoying Jews and Greeks in the city. Therefore, the whereabouts of the army are not concealed, and the citizens of Thessaloniki are allowed to watch. Among the crowd watching, a little girl in red, sitting on a small bench beside the road with her head down, peas in the white porcelain bowl in front of you. An hour later, the figure of the army had already disappeared from the city gate. The little girl ran fast with a porcelain bowl in both hands, towards the warehouse area in Thessaloniki. Seeing Valgris, who was smoking a cigarette and pacing back and forth in front of the warehouse, he shouted with joy, "Dad!" Valgris stepped forward quickly and hugged her. "Look, Dad, according to what you said, when the army passed by me, I put a pea in the bowl before I counted 100. The little girl held the white porcelain bowl high in her right hand and handed it to Valgris. Said like an invitation, an expression like I'm very powerful, and a childish face full of joy, "Yes, my little Pelagia, the smartest." Valgris reported to Pelagia with his left hand and took the porcelain bowl with his right. Cura stepped forward, took the porcelain bowl carefully, looked at the small half bowl of peas, turned and walked into the warehouse, counting the peas one by one. The Ministry of Defense building in Athens, Greece. Since the outbreak of the war, even though he did not understand the military, King George I still came to the Ministry of Defense building every day to listen to the staff of the General Staff and explain the military dynamics of the front line to him. Emma Inner was discussing military affairs with King George, when the staff members suddenly stepped forward, and after saluting, went to the two of them. Report. Thessaloniki Intelligence Department has sent an urgent telegram. The Ottoman garrison in Thessaloniki city, 13,000 people supporting the Macedonian front line, have set off this morning to go to the front line battlefield. Hearing this, Emma Inner was startled and said with a trembling voice, "It seems that the key conditions of Athena's plan have been met." According to previous information, the total number of troops stationed in Thessaloniki is no more than 15,000. Now, in order to ease the pressure on the front line, the enemy has deployed 13,000 reinforcements. In fact, Ouz Pasha led a total of 14,000 people to the front line for support, and there was an error of 1,000 people in the information even if he knew a little about the military. www.uxiaspit.com. King George understood the importance of this news. This means that the garrison in Thessaloniki is less than 2,000, and the defense is extremely empty. Emma Inner excitedly instructed the telegraph staff, send a telegram to the navy, and immediately execute the Athena plan. In the southern part of the Greek peninsula, in the smoky Aegean Sea, a special fleet cruises on the sea near Crete. The special feature of this fleet is that the flags of Britain, France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Russia, Italy, and other countries are hung on the masts of several warships. Since the two countries declared war, Britain, France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Russia, and Italy formed an international fleet to patrol Crete in order to interfere in the situation. The island of Crete in the eastern Mediterranean is geographically important, between the Greek peninsula and Libya, and not far from Egypt and Asia Minor. For the European powers, controlling Crete has many advantages. Starting from Crete, it can radiate many strategic points, and it is easy to cut off the Mediterranean shipping, the Dardanelles Strait, the throat of the Black Sea, the Otranto Strait, the gateway to the Adriatic Sea, the important waterway from the Mediterranean Sea to the Indian Ocean, the Suez Canal. It is precisely because of the important strategic position of Crete that after the uprising in Crete, the European powers all have ideas about Crete. Chapter 127, Raid. On the cruiser Congo, the flagship of the Aegean fleet, Canturatus stood on the side of the ship, holding a telescope, observing the international fleet not far away. Since the Greek fleet escorted 2,000 soldiers to the island of Crete, it has been cruising around Crete in order to support the army soldiers on the island at any time until a powerful international fleet appeared in the Aegean Sea. The combat readiness patrols of the Greek fleet were not affected after all. The most eye-catching warships in the Greek fleet are only two Esmeralda-class cruisers. The difference between the strength and the international fleet is too great. However, this does not mean that Greece's weaker navy cannot make a difference. A telegraph operator hurriedly came to Canturatus, gave a salute, and said aloud, "Sir, I just received a secret telegram from the General Staff, which reads, 'The country will rise and fall, and here is a war.'" Hearing this, Canturatus immediately took the telegram from the telegraph operator and personally confirmed the content. Messenger, notify other warships, turn the course. The messenger on the mast of the Congo, waving the flag, communicated the commander's order to the other warships. At noon on November 26, the entire Aegean fleet turned around, including 2 cruisers and 3 destroyers, heading straight north. Marine camp on the island of Aegina. 2,000 Marines lined up to board 4 Greek Navy ships. The captains of the 4 ships were ordered to set off immediately to join the Aegean fleet in the Kaphirev Strait at 6:10 in the afternoon. The 2 fleets gathered together, along the coastline of the Greek peninsula, all the way north. After the current Sultan Hamid I of the Ottoman Empire came to power, he did not trust naval generals, and could work in the navy and serve as senior naval officers. Generally, they have experience in studying in the West, have high academic qualifications, and have a broad vision. They naturally hate Ottomans. Empire-style autocracy. The two previous sultans before Hamid I stepped down due to the demonstration of naval ships in front of the Dolmabey's palace. It is precisely because of the disgraceful resume of the Ottoman Navy that after Hamid I came to power, he allowed the Navy's warships to rot on the Golden Horn as a result. Although the Aegean fleet of the Greek Navy is not worth mentioning in front of the European powers, in this war, the Ottoman Navy did not dare to sail out of the Dardanelles. The warships of the Ottoman Navy have suffered from frequent failures due to lack of maintenance all year round. The sailors of the Navy have long since gone to fend for themselves because they cannot receive wages for a long time under such circumstances. The Greek Navy, as long as it does not provoke the warships of foreign powers, can definitely show off its might in the Aegean Sea. At noon on December 27, the Aegean fleet blocked the Thermaic Gulf, and warships flying the Greek blue and white cross flags were cruising at the entrance of Thermaic Gulf. The Thermaic Gulf is a bay sandwiched between the Greek peninsula and the Halkidiki Peninsula, and Thessaloniki city is located in the northern part of the Thermaic Gulf. After night fell, the 3 destroyers in the fleet continued to patrol the entrance, while the other 2 cruisers, together with the 4 ships that transported 2,000 marines, formed a new mixed fleet, which quietly entered under the cover of the night. The Thermaic Gulf warehouse area in Thessaloniki City Pier. December 27, night. 30 or 40 young Special Forces soldiers wiped their rifles and counted their bullets in addition to the grenades. They also had 2 60mm mortars. Mortars are the only heavy weapons of Special Forces. These weapons have been stored in secret places in warehouses for a long time. Just to complete this mission, Valgaris walked into the crowd and arranged a specific plan for the operation. Everyone is divided into 2 groups. One group is led by me. The task is to blow up the ammunition warehouse in the west of the city. Valgaris looked at everyone and said expressionlessly, "The second group is led by Kuros. He is familiar with the terrain of the port of Thessaloniki and knows where it is suitable to guide the marines to land. As a map maker, no one knows where he landed better than Kuros." Valgaris and his party of 15 people, armed with 2 mortars, disappeared into the night reservation landing area. According to the requirements of the intelligence department, the landing site that Kuros selected for the Marine Corps is an open beach, which is very suitable for assault boats to land on the beach. Several people hid behind a rock near the beach. "Captain Kuros, reconnaissance, there are no patrol personnel on this beach," said a team member with curly hair. Hearing this, Kuros raised his hand and glanced at the luminous watch. The time showed 5 o'clock. "It is the time when people are the most tired. Take action." The team members moved quickly, carrying iron drums of gasoline, and went to the beach. They scattered and piled the flammable substances, wood and quilts prepared in advance, into several places, poured gasoline on them, and ignited the signal. The burning gasoline was particularly conspicuous in the night. On the mast of the Congo, in the darkness, the lookout kept going back and forth to search for the fire signal requested by the commander. Suddenly, the fire signal in the night finally appeared, and the entire fleet deck was brightly lit and busy. The Marines made concerted efforts to lower the assault boat to the sea and board the assault boat through a rope ladder like a fishing net hanging on the side of the boat. After the 50 assault boats were launched, each carrying 10 Marines, under the command of the Marine Corps commander, Kantaridis, started the gasoline engine and charged away towards the fire signal on the shore. After half an hour of busy work, a total of 2,000 fully armed soldiers successfully landed on the coast at 6 o'clock. A deafening sound woke everyone in the city of Thessaloniki from their sleep. www.uxiaspit.com. A strong shock wave shattered the glass of all the buildings in the city. A huge mushroom-shaped red fire lit up the whole of Thessaloniki. Osman stayed at the garrison camp, but Commander Lassaline Hassan was awakened by the huge movement. In a panic, he grabbed his clothes and put them on his body, and walked quickly to the camp with the soldiers. "What happened?" Hassan grabbed a soldier passing by and asked. When the soldier saw Hassan, his face was terrified and he said, "Captain Hassan, there seems to be an explosion in the armament warehouse." Hassan's face was pale, and he was stunned on the spot. In the armament warehouse, there was a month's supply of supplies for the Macedonian army on the front line, including ammunition, food, cotton clothes, quilts, medicine and other materials. Now all that is gone, ruined. Hassan was full of such thoughts he would be shot by a furious Edmund Pasha. At this moment, there was a sound of gunshots, and the Marine Corps began to enter the city of Thessaloniki after dividing a part of its troops to control the dock area. After 3 hours of fighting, nearly 800 Ottoman Turkish soldiers were captured, and Thessaloniki was completely controlled. After receiving the news, Kantaridis on the Congo reported the news to the Athens General Staff and the front line command of the Thessaly Legion. Chapter 128, Key to War. Thessaly Legion, Front Command. The Thessaly Legion headquarters received the news immediately. The Marine Corps successfully captured the city of Thessaloniki on the 27th and night. There was a relaxed and happy atmosphere in the conference room, because it meant that the most important step of Athena's plan had been completed. Now the whole war situation is very clear. The Ottoman Macedonian Legion's logistical supply transfer station has been taken care of by us. Chief of Staff of the Legion, Canaris, said briskly. The officers burst into laughter. Think about it. The more than 80,000 Ottoman Macedonian legions in front of us are eating horses and feeding ammunition, and the consumption every day is an astronomical figure. For such a legion, the logistics supply line was cut off by us, and the enemy was completely passive. The main idea of the so-called Athena plan is to use the 40,000 Congolese colonial troops suddenly strengthened by the Greek army to disrupt the deployment of the enemy's army, and use this as an opportunity to find the enemy's flaws, and then use the enemy's flaws to lay the foundation for a complete defeat of the enemy. The Athena project is such a surprisingly successful project. Undoubtedly, there is a lot of risk involved in this plan. What if the enemy did not act according to the General Staff's expectations? What would happen if the Marine Corps landed a large number of soldiers on the coast in such a short period of time and failed? This is also the reason why the Chief of General Staff believes that Athena's plan is too risky. Fortunately, so far, attacking the enemy's flaws, taking advantage of the emptiness of Thessaloniki's defenses, using the Marine Corps sneak attack, the Greek army has been successful, but the period after this is the most critical stage of victory. The next period of time is the most critical. Constantine said in a serious tone. If the enemy's reinforcements take back Thessaloniki first, get through the supply line of the frontline army, then the morale will soar, successfully defeat us, or continue the war. There is no doubt that once the enemy recaptures Thessaloniki and regains its strength, the best outcome for Greece is that the war will continue to stalemate. For Greece, a small country with few people, this can almost directly declare the war to fail. Even though the Ottoman Empire's national strength was seriously declining, the skinny camels were larger than horses, with a vast territory and a population of tens of millions. By contrast, Greece has a population of no more than 2 million and a territory of only 50,000 square kilometers. Greece is not qualified to hold a stalemate with each other at all, and the size of the two countries is not on the same level. A quick decision is the only option for Greece to win the war. On the other hand, the Ottomans are different. As long as they continue, although they will suffer a certain amount of consumption and cause the domestic economy to deteriorate, it is still more cost-effective than losing the war. There is a fundamental difference between big and small countries in terms of their ability to withstand war. For a big country, if a war is lost once or twice, although it will be disheartened, its huge size can still allow it to support it and have a chance to turn over. In a country like the Ottomans, since entering the 19th century, the decline of the Ottomans has been extremely obvious, and several wars have ended in failure had it not been for the interference of other countries. The Ottoman Sultan would have been overthrown by Ali of Egypt at that time. Ali's army had even taken Nicaea. Even so decadent, until the 20th century, the Ottomans remained one of the major powers in Europe. This is not the case for a small country like Greece. A war directly determines the fate of the country. There won't be any chance to turn around at all. A war is lost, and the cost is enormous. The fate of the losers of military adventures is the constant military coups, economic turmoil, serious internal frictions in the country, and hardship for the people. It's still our Thessaly Legion. Before the enemy regained Thessaloniki, we defeated the face-to-face enemy, the Ottoman Macedonian Legion, and then quickly rushed to the aid of Thessaloniki and Epirus, and won a brilliant victory. The atmosphere in the conference room became solemn. In the course of the subsequent war, Thessaloniki will become the key to the war. Osman regains Thessaloniki, then Osman will win. The Greek army firmly held Thessaloniki, and after defeating the Ottoman army, which was stuck in supply woes, was able to end the war with a victory. The fate of Thessaloniki determines the fate of the two countries. This is a race against time. There is no doubt that in order to win the war and regain the initiative on the battlefield, the Ottomans will draw troops from all over the country to attack Thessaloniki frantically in the next period of time. Relying on 2,000 Marines is far from enough to defend this important city. After all, the Marine Corps is not a regular army. Their only heavy weapons are some mortars. It is urgent to send reinforcements to support Thessaloniki. Commander of the 1st Division, Major General Manu Gianiski. Constantine ordered Manu Gianiski immediately rose respectfully from his chair. Order your unit to go to Thessaloniki immediately and help the Marine Corps where it is. Constantine said solemnly. The 1st Division was the earliest established division in Greece, and most of the soldiers were elite. brave and good at fighting. It's just that since the beginning of the frontier battle, it has been placed behind the front by Constantine as a strategic reserve. This put Manu Gianaski, the 1st Division commander, in an embarrassing situation. And he has always had opinions on this arrangement. Now the 1st Division was finally given a combat mission. It's just that Manu Gianaski felt a huge pressure in an instant. Looking at the embarrassed Manu Gianaski, Constantine frowned and said, "Major General Manu Gianaski, don't you feel intimidated?" The people in the conference room were somewhat considerate to Manu Gianaski. As the key to the victory of the war, Thessaloniki, the Ottomans will definitely send a large number of troops to besiege Thessaloniki. Just relying on one division of Manu Gianaski, even if it was the 1st Division of the Greek army, with a strong combat capability, www.uxiaspit.com, was not enough to make up for the huge gap in numbers. Your Excellency the Legion Commander, if you want the 1st Division to stay in Thessaloniki for a longer time, you must supply us with more heavy equipment. Let's not say anything else. You have to allocate at least 90 Maxim heavy machine guns to us. There are also heavy artillery, the 105mm howitzer we purchased from the French. You should also add 20 to our 1st Division. The Ottoman Empire army has a lot of heavy artillery with a caliber of more than 100mm. Due to the limitations of the mountainous terrain in northern Greece, such heavy artillery is difficult to use. However, the terrain of Thessaloniki is different, and it is surrounded by a plain. Such heavy artillery can be called a battlefield killer, not only with huge lethality, but also with a long range. In order to quickly retake Thessaloniki, the Ottoman army must not be stingy with the use of heavy artillery in the offensive in Thessaloniki. Relying only on the artillery regiment of the 1st Division, the 75mm rapid-fire field artillery equipped, both in terms of range and power, could hardly cope with the threat of the Ottoman army's large-caliber heavy artillery. As for the Maxim heavy machine gun, from the perspective of defensive operations, it is indeed more suitable for defensive operations. The Maxim heavy machine gun weighs 27 kilograms and is water-cooled. It is really not very useful in the offensive operations of the frontier battle. It is better to use it by the 1st Division. Constantine thought for a moment, then nodded in agreement with Manu Gianaski's request. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129, Artillery Assault. Remember for a second, although Constantine also understood that such a combat arrangement was a bit risky, once the 1st Division fell to Thessaloniki, the whole battle situation would be reversed. However, limited by objective conditions, the Greek army really did not have that much to assist in defending Thessaloniki. After all, the border area is the main battlefield of this war, facing the enemy's main army, the Ottoman army, with a number of 80,000 people. Although its logistics line was cut off and it would fall into chaos in the next battle, it was still a regular army of 80,000 people, and it was possible that the Thessaly Legion would be severely damaged in a desperate fight after the Thessaly Legion deployed a 15,000 strong 1st Division to defend Thessaloniki. There were still about 100,000 troops left. In order to encircle and wipe out the Macedonian Legion as soon as possible, it was also stretched on December 29. The 1st Division of the Greek army, which had long been waiting in the coastal town of Karamijan in northeastern Greece, with a total of 15,000 men, took advantage of the cover of the navy and took the ship to Thessaloniki. Former enemy command of the Ottoman army. After receiving the news that the city of Thessaloniki was lost, Edmund Pasha collapsed on the chair like a deflated balloon. This wiping the cold sweat from his forehead, his trembling lips were speechless. The German consultant Golz walked to the office, picked up the telegram, and after reading the content, his face was equally pale. Before, he also felt that in order to alleviate the passive situation on the front line, it was worth taking a little risk. Even if the troops that originally defended Thessaloniki were recruited, it was only a 10-day gap in defense, and other troops would soon come to make up the defense. Although Goltz originally felt that it was inappropriate to transfer the defense forces in Thessaloniki, he was an officer from the German army, and Germany was not a naval power at this time, which made him insensitive to naval power. Never thought that the Greeks would use the navy, bypass the front line, and directly attack the city of Thessaloniki. The logistics of the 80,000 troops have been cut off, and this battle cannot be fought at all. No matter how powerful the artillery is, it is useless without shells. No matter how brave and fearless soldiers are, they are after all flesh and blood. Should we retreat? After a long time, Edmund finally regained his senses and asked Getz, the logistics supervisor. Getz didn't answer, walked to the door and ordered the guards. The quartermaster, who was notified by the guards, hurried to the headquarters and saw Edmund Pasha and the German advisor Getz, both of whom looked bad. Commander Akile, how long can our logistics supplies last? Goraz asked hurriedly. Akilmer calculated for a moment and responded, Mr. Goals, according to the current consumption rate, the material stored in our army's current warehouse on the front line can still supply the army's needs for 15 days, Edmund and Getz looked at each other, and then there was silence. After a while, Edmund said in a dry voice, Mr. Akile, our logistical supplies have been cut off. From now on, we must pay attention to the consumption of our army's supplies, whether it is the soldiers' food or ammunition, use as sparingly as possible. Looking at Akile with a dazed face, he sighed and Edmund continued, this news must not be spread out, lest the military's heart be shaken, and those who spread rumors indiscriminately in the army will be dealt with by military law. Mr. Golds, what should we do now? Do we need the army to retreat? The front-line troops were inferior and had been cut off from supplies. Facing such a bad situation, Edmund was a little upset. The two armies are now tightly entangled. Our army's sudden retreat will only give the enemy an opportunity to take advantage. The retreat is likely to cause confusion on our side. The enemy will surely bite us tightly. The first task now is to retake Thessaloniki. Pasha, please order immediately. Let the troops drawn from the Constantinople garrison speed up their march and attack Thessaloniki. And Aus, who was originally stationed in Thessaloniki, told him not to come to the front line, turn around immediately, return to Thessaloniki, and attack the city of Thessaloniki with the troops from Constantinople. When the Greek army is not firmly established, it must be fast. Getz calmly analyzed. After bidding farewell to the 1st Division of Manu Gianiski, Constantine, who felt the urgency of time, immediately issued a new combat order: take advantage of his illness and kill him, messaging the commanders of the Thessaly Legion at all levels. From now on, the army should not be stingy with ammunition. Canaris nodded and said yes. On January 3, 1897, after a week-long stalemate between the two armies, the divisions received an order. The bullet dividers in the rifles were now removed, and the rate of fire of the 75mm rapid-fire guns was no longer limited. Immediately afterwards, the artillery units of the Thessaly Legion were deployed directly at the front of the front by the command, with bayonets on the artillery, direct fire, and approached the Ottoman army. The soldiers of the 2nd Division's artillery regiment, after receiving the order of the general headquarters, used mules and horses to drag the field artillery and crossed the trenches of their own soldiers to construct artillery positions. Colonel Oles, the commander of the artillery regiment, personally commanded his artillery after receiving an order from his superiors. A total of 45 field guns crossed the line defended by the soldiers of the 2nd Division. Report to the head of the regiment, the artillery position is completed, please instruct. The messenger walked up to Colonel Oles and said loudly, watching enemy positions 0 cap 1 second to remember. Oles put down the telescope in his hand and ordered, rapid fire, target, Ottoman army position. Rapid fire, target, Ottoman positions. Orders from commanders at all levels spread through the artillery positions in turn. After receiving the order, I saw the artillery squads, under the command of the squad leader. The artillery huffed and breathed flames and made a deafening sound. The loader moved quickly to take out the shells from the wooden box. Holding the cannonball in both hands, it was loaded into the cannon. Brr. When the other members of the team saw the action of the launcher, they quickly covered their ears with their hands. Boom. The positions of the entire Ottoman Corps www.uxiaspit.com were long and 5 kilometers wide, submerged in the dust generated by the explosion, and the strongholds of the front were severely damaged in view of the mountainous and hilly terrain of northern Greece. Although the battlefield of the two armies chose an open field, the soil was thin, and neither the Ottoman army nor the Greek Thessaly army, the trenches dug by the infantry, were not enough to protect their own safety in the face of artillery strikes. Such temporary fortifications are not enough. This is good news for the Greek army, which has an absolute advantage in artillery, taking advantage of the gap between the artillery bombardment. The infantry on the front line took the time to rest amid the rumble of explosions. The artillery units that used to hide behind the front line and provided artillery support from a distance, now, uncharacteristically, they ran to the front of the front line against the Ottoman army. The Greek artillerymen showed their bravery. Dear, this chapter is over. I wish you a happy reading. Cap 0 Cap Chapter 130, Offensive and Defensive Battle. Taking advantage of the time when the artillerymen were showing their might, the infantrymen of the 2nd Division rarely had time to rest under the shade of the trees behind their positions. The newly enlisted soldier, Valvis, carefully held 2 aluminum lunchboxes, which contained a loaf of whole wheat bread, marmalade, a packet of coffee, 5 salted olives, and a piece of cured fish. Go to the resting place of the class. Seeing that the monitor Lufus was taking a nap with his back against the roots of a tree, Valvis quietly stepped forward, sat opposite Valvis, and put the lunchbox in his hand in front of the monitor. Lufus, hearing the movement, Rufus opened his eyes and saw that it was a recruit who brought meals for him. He nodded the lunchbox, opened it and glanced at the food in it, frowned, and looked the same again. Although this kind of food is not bad, there are all kinds of meat and vegetables. If people outside the army see it, they will definitely think that the food in the army is good. However, if you eat the same food every day, you will feel nauseated within a few days. Squad leader, here it is. Valvis handed the kettle over and shook it. There was a rustling sound in the kettle. Today we will serve wine, and I asked the cook to fill you 100 milliliters more. Rufus took a bite of the fish and gulped down a mouthful of wine. Squad leader, why do you think our Greek army deploys artillery in front of the infantry? Chewing salted olives, Vervis tilted his neck and watched the artillery positions 100 meters away. Rufus, who was drinking with his head down, glanced at Valvis. His young face reminded him that this soldier was probably not yet 19 years old, and his life was just beginning, and scolded, "You are a big-headed soldier, what are you doing?" Yes. In that spare time, it is better to think about the attack in the afternoon, how to survive. Valvis defended, "No, monitor, I just graduated from high school this year. I always wanted to be an artilleryman." Lufus didn't raise his head, and you said, "I can't believe that you are still a rich boy." Even though Greece has universalized compulsory education, there are not many school-age children who can go to high school, usually from wealthy families. For children from ordinary families, if their grades are not outstanding after primary school, their academic career will be over. The number of these students accounts for about 60% of the students. Valvis blushed and continued, "No, monitor, my studies have always been funded by the foundation. The foundation is the Royal Educational Foundation. The Royal Education Foundation supports students with high academic performance but from modest backgrounds. The principals and teachers of almost every primary school in Greece have the responsibility of recommending students for them. As long as the students' grades are qualified, the foundation will support them all the way to university until they complete their studies. Of course, there are not many students who meet the requirements of the Royal Education Foundation, and the number of college students funded by the foundation does not exceed 3,000 each year. University graduates of this era are really elite talents even after these students graduate from university. If they can still maintain their academic excellence, the foundation will even send them to other countries, such as well-known universities in Germany, to continue their studies. Of course, such students will have some restrictions on employment after completing their studies. For example, you must work for a certain period of time in the position required by the foundation. Hearing that Vervis was such a top student, he exclaimed, "I didn't expect you to be such a lucky one." Lucky is how the Greeks describe students who, with the help of the foundation, have had a smooth academic journey. Are you interested in artillery? Rufus said to Vervis while biting his bread. In fact, I have already submitted an application to the foundation, requesting to enter the Athens Military Academy to study artillery subjects. Said here, Vervis was full of pride. "I heard that artillery requires knowledge of mathematics, and I happen to have good grades in mathematics." Vervis said happily, "If you can successfully complete the artillery subject at the Athens Military Academy, you will be an officer." After entering the army in the European countries at the end of the 19th century, the social status of officers was very high. In fact, the social status of officers is also very high, and officers in various countries like to wear uniforms. The artillery is deployed forward, which is a tactic. First, hit the opponent with fierce artillery fire, suppress the enemy, and destroy their fortifications, Lufus explained to Vervis. Then, the infantry will charge, start the infantry charge, and occupy the enemy's position. Vervis, who was feasting, stopped his mouth, gulped down the food in his mouth, and said, "Then are we going to attack the Ottoman positions in the afternoon?" Rufus glanced at Vervis and said, "Why do you think the sir wants us to rest this morning?" Vervis suddenly felt that the bread in his hand was not fragrant. This is his first time on the battlefield. Seeing the uneasy look of the recruits, Lufus comforted, "When you go to the battlefield in the afternoon, Pay attention to my instructions." While the two were talking, the roar of artillery that lasted for a whole morning suddenly stopped. The preparation time for the entire artillery fire reached one morning, consuming a full 10,000 rounds of artillery shells. After the smoke and dust on the Ottoman positions dissipated, the soldiers observing with binoculars could not help but take a breath. The entire position seemed to have been plowed again, and it was full of messes. The Ottoman soldiers in the trenches were almost buried by the rolling dirt. All turned grey after the shelling stopped. Constantine officially issued an order: the whole army should be assaulted. The Greek army from two sides, mainly the 4th Division and Aquengeles Division, with nearly 30,000 people, launched a diversionary attack on the Ottoman army from the side. Reading www.uucanchu.com. On the frontal battlefield, the 2nd and 3rd Divisions, as well as 2 Aquengeles Divisions, were responsible for storming the positions defended by the Ottoman army from the front. Rifuspan, who received the order, charged towards the Ottoman positions that had just stopped being bombarded in the form of skirmish lines, with a distance of about 6 meters between each of them. Ottoman army positions. After a morning of artillery torment, the soldiers were almost deaf, only dizzy and buzzing in their ears. An Ottoman soldier shook the dirt on his head, reached out of the trench, and observed the situation on the battlefield, only to see that on the battlefield, the Greek soldiers attacked their own positions in evacuation formation, raised their voices, and shouted hysterically, "The enemy is attack! Attack!" The Ottoman soldiers who heard the shots leaned out of the trenches and shot at the moving Greek soldiers. The gunshots sounded, and Rufus shouted, "Shoot alternately! Cover each other!" with an order. 5 of the 10 soldiers of Rifuspan squatted on the ground and shot at the local positions to cover the other soldiers. The other 5 bowed their bodies, armed with rifles, and continued to charge towards the enemy positions. When the 5 people's bullets were exhausted, the other 5 people took cover and moved forward alternately. The tragic offensive and defensive battle officially started. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version. Reading website, Chapter 131, Surrender. While the tragic offensive and defensive battle on the Greek border was going on, Thessaloniki's 1st Division was also under enormous pressure due to the important position of Thessaloniki. The 2 divisions of the Ottoman army, with a total of about 30,000 people, frantically attacked the positions of the 1st Division. In order to relieve its frontline army, the number of enemy troops was twice that of the defenders of Thessaloniki. In addition, the Ottoman army used a lot of heavy artillery in the process of attacking Thessaloniki, which doubled the pressure on the 1st Division. But the 1st Division of Manu Gianaski also had its own unique advantages. First of all, because Thessaloniki is surrounded by plains. In order to hold on to Thessaloniki, Manu Gianaski ordered the troops to dig deep trenches to deal with the enemy's heavy artillery bombardment. In order to strengthen the defense capability of the front line, the 1st Division used Maxim heavy machine guns at the same time, and cooperated with the trenches to defend the positions, which made the Ottoman army attacking Thessaloniki feel difficult. Every attack was under the heavy machine gun fire of the Greek army. It was heavy casualties. These Maxim heavy machine guns were part of the Greek armament before the war and were purchased from Germany. Relying on the combination of trenches and Maxim machine guns, the 1st Division was able to be as solid as a rock under the successive attacks of the superior Ottoman troops. Second, the logistical convenience of the 1st Division. Weapons like the Maxim heavy machine gun can fire at a rate of 300 rounds per minute at full fire, and the bullets are shot out like flowing water without adequate logistical support. The army is simply asking for trouble when using such weapons. In fact, it is precisely because of the abnormal rate of fire of the Maxim heavy machine gun that many military strategists have concerns about it. What level of logistics does this thing need before the army can use it? For Greece, the problem was neatly solved. The Ottoman navy is not even capable of sailing out of the Dardanelles to fight. In contrast, the Greek navy can patrol the Aegean Sea with impunity. At the request of Constantine, the navy continued to transport logistical supplies and supplementary troops in Greece for the 1st Division of the fierce battle by sea, and at the same time transported the wounded of the 1st Division back to Athens when they returned. It can be said that with the full support of the navy, the 1st Division, which has no worries, can let go of its hands and feet and fully defend Thessaloniki. With this unique advantage, from January 10th to 23rd, under the attack of the superior Ottoman army, the city of Thessaloniki was impregnable and unbreakable. On January 26th, the Ottoman war in Greece had been going on for about 2 months due to lack of supplies. The Macedonian legion of the Ottoman army could barely cope with a strong attack of the Greek Thessaly legion in January. The shortage of supplies in the Ottoman army was extremely obvious. and the news of the logistical cut-off spread like wildfire in the Ottoman army. In order to collect the rations of the soldiers, almost all the peasants near the battlefield, whether they were Greeks, Jews, or even MSLs, were looted by starving soldiers. Even so, after January 20th, the entire army had no intention of fighting. The soldiers were panicking, and they had to deal with the offensive of the Greek army every day. In the early days, in the face of the fire preparations of the Greek artillery, the Ottoman artillery would fire back. In the later stage, the Ottoman army simply huddled in the shallow trenches of the position, and the officers would not order the soldiers to fire until the Greek army attacked. Despair spread among the soldiers. The Austrian commander, Edmund, was looking forward to the news of retaking Thessaloniki and restoring logistical supplies in order to trap the enemy Macedonian legion. Constantine personally informed the Epirus legion to bite the Ottoman garrison in the city of Ioannina, so that it had no time to worry about the Macedonian legion. The Macedonian legion, which was standing firm and awaiting assistance, was flanked by the Greek army on both sides. After the hope of opening up the logistics was dashed, it was too late to retreat. The helpless Edmund Pasha surrendered to Constantine in disgrace on the morning of the 27th. The cheers of the soldiers soared into the sky. Standing in the command camp, Constantine could clearly hear the movement on the ground. In the border battle, the Ottoman army lost 80,000 soldiers, 25,000 people were killed and wounded, and more than 60,000 people were captured. Almost half of the casualties were from Greek artillery. The Thessaly legion suffered 15,000 casualties, including 5,000 Congolese. In order to celebrate this victory, the command ordered the soldiers of the Thessaly legion to rest for 2 days, and at the same time held a celebration banquet for the soldiers. Greece won the border battle and wiped out the Ottoman Macedonian regiment, causing a big uproar in Europe. The next day, the British Foreign Secretary personally visited the headquarters of Constantine to verify the specific situation of the Greek campaign on the spot. A great and glorious victory, Your Highness Constantine. From today onwards, your name will be known throughout Europe. The Marquess of Salisbury was a flatterer when he saw Constantine. Thank you for your congratulations. Marquess Constantine greeted him and entered the conference room. Your Highness, do you know? The whole of the Balkans, and even the whole of Europe, has been shocked by your victory. Having said this, Salisbury turned worried. According to our ambassador in Belgrade, the news of the Ottoman army defeated by the Greek army reached Serbia, and the King of Serbia immediately ordered the mobilization of the army. I was just scolded by the Austro-Hungarian Empire and asked it to stop the dangerous move of mobilizing the army. Similar news also came from Bulgaria. These two countries are now on the verge of turmoil. This was expected by Constantine. www.uxiaspit.com. After all, both Serbia and Bulgaria covet the Ottoman territories, especially European territories, and it is absolutely possible to fall into the trap. However, the big brothers behind these two countries, Austria-Hungary and Russia, do not want their two younger brothers to do anything wrong at this time. Austria-Hungary does not want Serbia to become stronger, even if Serbia is Austria-Hungary's little brother. Austria-Hungary and Serbia also have contradictions. There are a large number of Slavs in Austria-Hungary. Among them, Croatia and Slovenia, and even Bosnia and Herzegovina, which Austria-Hungary took over in 1881. All have a large number of Slavs in the eyes of Serbian nationalists. These are fellow Serbs. Serbia and Austria-Hungary are neighboring countries, and the growth of Serbia is not on the interests of Austria-Hungary in the same way. After obtaining the eastern Rumelia province, which originally belonged to the Ottomans, Bulgaria was infinitely close to the target that Russia had coveted for hundreds of years. Constantinople. Russia has fought 8 Russo-Turkish wars for this city. How can Bulgaria be allowed to interfere? So both countries, while coveting the troubled Ottoman Empire, were helpless. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 132, War Ended. In Europe now, every country is enjoying prosperity, Salisbury said with a serious face. The major powers do not want to break this harmonious situation. Once the Russians' attention is drawn back to Europe, Greece's interests will also suffer. Salisbury's so-called Russian attention means something. After the Berlin Conference in 1881, European countries reached an agreement in Berlin to maintain the current situation in Europe. To put it bluntly, it means, don't think about doing things in Europe, just stay calm. The intentions against the Russians are very clear. The most intuitive impression of Russia as a country is its endless greed for land. Every one of Russia's neighbors counts as one, and almost all of them have fought with Russia and suffered Russian invasion. Expansion is the life of Russia. This is not because of the brutality and greed of the Russians, but is determined by the national conditions of this country. Russia is a country with serious shortcomings. It is located inland, has high latitudes, and has a cold climate. The history of Russia's rise is a history of finding a warm port from Sweden. Russia got St. Petersburg from Ottoman Turkey. Russia got Crimea and Ukraine, but God seems to have played a joke with the Russians. They can't find a good warm water port with convenient shipping, whether it is St. Petersburg or Crimea. Although they are indeed excellent ports, these ports have serious drawbacks. The throat of the port is controlled by others, and it is very easy to be cut off. Peter the Great defeated the Swedes and got St. Petersburg, which is located in the Baltic Sea, the gateway of the Baltic Sea to the Atlantic Ocean, and the Denmark-Norway Strait, which is very easy to be blocked. Catherine the Great got to Crimea on the coast of the Black Sea, but the Bosphorus Strait is the only place where the Black Sea enters the Mediterranean Sea. Whether it is the Black Sea or the Baltic Sea, it is a semi-closed ocean. After the Berlin Treaty of 1881, Russia saw no chance for European expansion. A possibility that the Berlin Treaty had sealed off. Russia continued to expand eastward and began to pursue ports in the Pacific Ocean to expand in Asia. For this strategy, a concept of Yellow Russia was specially proposed. Salisbury's implied meaning is that Greece's war behavior may draw Russia's attention back to Europe, and this is a situation that no European country, whether it is Germany or Austria-Hungary, but also the United Kingdom, is unwilling to see. At once the Ottomans were torn apart by war, Russia naturally preferred the European port of Constantinople instead of Vladivostok, thousands of miles away. So, Salisbury's words are an implicit threat. Greece should not do things that everyone doesn't like. Constantine couldn't help but admire the professionalism of Salisbury. The British foreign minister to speak threatening and offensive words secretly and implicitly requires exquisite language art, especially in the face of a military general like Constantine who just won a brilliant victory. From Salisbury's words, Constantine knew that the British intended to mediate the Hale War. Constantine did not have any extravagant hopes. In just one battle, the Ottomans were wiped out. Negotiation must be negotiated. However, the Greek army still has to continue its military operations. The Thessaly Legion just defeated the Ottoman army on the border. Except for Thessaloniki, the other Ottoman territories, Greece had no control over. So far, the fierce battle in Thessaloniki area is still going on at this time of negotiation. What are we talking about at the negotiating table? The territory that was not obtained on the battlefield does not need to be mentioned at the negotiating table, and it is impossible for people to agree. In case Hamid-I gritted his teeth, recruited soldiers from the country, and continued to fight, it would add twists and turns. The number of the Ottoman Empire's army is about 200,000. In addition to the garrison of Ioannina, which confronted the Greek Epirus Legion, and the two divisions that attacked Thessaloniki, the Ottoman Empire was on the borders of Bulgaria and Serbia, and the Caucasus. In the area of Constantinople, there are still about 100,000 troops despite the loss of a legion, 80,000 people. Osman was not a toothless tiger. However, the face of the British Empire was not dismissed casually. Constantine said to Salisbury, "Your Majesty, you are right, but the Greeks just want to be with their compatriots. It's not too much to ask for." Salisbury looked at the kind-hearted Constantine, and it seemed that he agreed with his opinion that the war would be ended immediately, but the meaning of his words was equally rich. The Greeks just wanted to be with their countrymen, which seems to be referring to the people of Crete who caused the war between Greece and the Ottoman Empire. But this Greek may also refer to the Greeks living in northern Epirus, Thessaloniki, Thrace, Constantinople, and the Aegean coast of Asia Minor. Then, Your Highness agrees to negotiate with the Ottoman Empire now. Salisbury continued, "It can be negotiated by the prime ministers of the two countries, the Grand Vizier, in London. I would love to see this." Constantine could only respond at this time, "The British Empire, Greece really could not refuse an act of kindness, Your Highness." Salisbury twitched his beard happily. After Salisbury left, Constantine immediately communicated to Athens that he had agreed to negotiate between the two countries on the same day. Salisbury and Prime Minister Tariq sailed to England to negotiate with the Ottomans on the issue of war. After a two-day rest, the soldiers of the Thessaly Legion set foot on the journey again, and the 2nd Division went to support Thessaloniki and end the threat of the Ottoman army to Thessaloniki. As for the other troops, they moved to North Epirus and cooperated with the Greek Epirus Legion to capture the city of Ioannina with a might of great victory. With the aid of the Epirus Legion www.uxiaspit.com, Thessaly Legion captured the capital of Epirus region, Ioannina, in just 10 days. The Greek army swept the defenseless Albania before the war, because there was no threat from Albania. Edmund sent all the defenders of Albania into his Macedonian army. The military operations of the Greek army in Albania have elicited almost no decent resistance. When the 2nd Division marched to the city of Thessaloniki, the commander of the Ottoman army, who got the news, understood that the situation was over. In order to quickly capture Thessaloniki, under the urging of Edmund, the two divisions made several storms. The positions of the 1st Division, defended by machine guns, suffered heavy casualties, with a loss of almost half of the personnel. Even without the assistance of the 2nd Division, their attack could no longer be sustained. In order to avoid unnecessary losses, the Ottoman army gathered outside Thessaloniki took the initiative to retreat and broke away from contact with the Greek army. As a result, the Ottoman territories occupied by the Greek army included northern Epirus, the whole of Albania, and the Aegean coast of Macedonia. In order not to further stimulate Serbia and Bulgaria, Constantine specially ordered the army not to enter the northern part of Macedonia. Because these areas are relatively close to the two countries, direct military action on the battlefield between the two countries came to an end. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 133, Parade. On January 30th, after Constantine handed over the work to the army chief of staff, Canaris was in charge of handling the work of the Greek army in the occupied area. Constantine himself, on the other hand, took a train and led a part of the army that had returned from the front to return to Athens. Sitting in the carriage, Constantine, who had nothing to do, stared at the rapidly receding scenery outside the car window, and was dazed. After the victory of the Greek army, Constantine felt a lot more relaxed, even breathing. As the highest frontline commander of the Greek army, Constantine himself has been under enormous pressure since the start of the war, and he carries the expectations of all Greeks to achieve great ideals and restore the empire once the Greek army suffered defeat. That expectation quickly turned into hatred. Constantine could well imagine how the Greeks would scold him once the army he commanded failed. The reputation of the Greek royal family will be criticized for the failure of the army. Fortunately, the results are good, and the war is almost over, with a winning result at present. The Ottoman army is only in a state of confrontation with the Greek army. Since the British Foreign Secretary, the Marquess of Salisbury, the two armies have not taken large-scale military operations against the enemy. Dong. Dong dong. The knock on the door of the carriage interrupted Constantine's silence. Come in. A young man pushed open the door and stood in the corridor. After giving a respectful salute to Constantine, he said, "Your Excellency, Legion Commander, I am here to inform you, this military train will stop in the small town of Aeonia for the soldiers to make a short repair. Get ready for tomorrow's army entry ceremony." This is His Majesty's plan. Constantine, who was completely relaxed, did not expect to face such trivial matters at all, so he pondered. "Okay, I see. Is there anything else?" Constantine asked, looking at the officer still standing at the door. "I am the officer sent by your Majesty to be in charge of the army's entrance ceremony, Demetrius." The train stopped in Ionia, a town in front of Athens. The soldiers on the train got off the train one after another, chatting in twos and threes in order to prepare for the grand entrance ceremony and trim the borders of the soldiers. Dozens of barbers in the Greek city were organized to arrange makeup for the soldiers who returned to the front line. The originally peaceful town became noisy after the arrival of 10,000 soldiers. The children of the town came among the soldiers, pestered them, and inquired about the situation on the battlefield. After fully satisfying his curiosity, he even played military games on the spot. After getting out of the car, Constantine took a bath, shaves, and then tried on clothes, a gorgeous and exquisite military dress, under the instructions of Demetrius. Due to the urgency of time, the maker of the dress came to the town with Demetrius in preparation for timely modification. In the presence of the tailor, Constantine tried on a high-ranking officer's dress, much like a European marshal's dress, a large brimmed hat, embroidered with 2 rings of golden olive leaves on the brim. A lot of gold embroidery is bright and bright. Breeches and vests are made of fine silk. After talking about wearing such a gorgeous set of clothes, Constantine had a new sense of military clothes. Whoever wears such clothes to the front line is purely courting death. At 8 o'clock in the morning the next day, the soldiers lined up in a neat queue and slowly marched towards the city of Athens. 2 kilometers away, following Demetrius' instructions, the troops appeared at the city gate. On the morning of January 30th, the news of the victory of the Greek army reached Athens. His Majesty King George personally announced the victory of Greece in front of the assembled people in Syntagma Square. When When the melodious sound of bronze bells resounded through the city of Athens, the church announced that the church bells were tolled for 3 consecutive days to celebrate the great victory of the Greek army. The Athenian people who heard the news gathered on both sides of the road from the entrance to the Syntagma Square to admire the majestic appearance of the Greek army in an atmosphere of joy. Constantine rode a strong purplish-red horse, leading the army into the city. Immediately behind him were a group of middle and senior officers who participated in the war, also dressed in fresh clothes and angry horses. In the end, there was an orderly queue of soldiers with long guns in their hands and shoulders. The parade troops headed by Constantine marched on the road, and the majestic soldiers and the audience paid attention to them. The people waved their clothes, hats and flowers to the army, expressing their joy. I don't know who started and shouted, "Long live Constantine! Long live Greece!" After 2 seconds of silence, the infected onlookers shouted in unison, "Long live Constantine! Long live Greece!" The sound seemed to overwhelm the danged and copper bell. The city of Athens was boiling, and the enthusiasm of the people seemed to warm up the whole city. The queue of 10,000 soldiers lasted for almost an hour before they all came to Constitution Square to be inspected by His Majesty King George. After the team disbanded, the happy soldiers scattered around the city and entered leisure places such as cafes and restaurants. When the shop owners saw soldiers in military uniforms coming to spend, they gave them the treatment of free orders to show their respect for the soldiers. At the same time, in Constantinople, the atmosphere in Topkapi Palace was completely different from the warm atmosphere in Athens. After the Minister of War reported the military situation on the front line, the entire Topkapi Palace seemed to be silent. In the conference room, King Hamid II, flushed, got up from the chair with shortness of breath, only to feel dizzy and swaying. The Minister of War quickly stepped forward and tried to help Hamid. Hamid struggled to break free, and with a squeak sounded, he swept all the documents and cups off the table, and sighed fiercely, "Edmund, you pig, you return my legion even if there are 80,000 pigs. Can't the Greeks just catch them all?" Since Ottoman Turkey was defeated by Russia in the Russo-Turkish War in 1878, the deeply humiliated Ottoman government has spent a lot of effort in training the new army. The reason why Hamid II completely abandoned the Ottoman navy was not entirely selfish. Although he really resented their repeated participation in rebellions, Hamid II also had his own difficulties. The Ottoman government did not have that much money. It is too expensive for a fallen dynasty like the Ottomans to build a navy while maintaining a large army sufficient to deal with Russia, and the army has the best price-performance ratio for a defending country. The price of a new warship is enough to build an army of several divisions. www.wuxiaspit.com. This strategy itself is not a problem. For a country with a weak industry like the Ottomans, almost no industry, the construction of the navy is almost entirely dependent on the military. British and French procurement of warships in the late 19th century, it was the period of great development of naval technology. The naval shipbuilding technology of various countries made rapid progress, which also meant that the replacement of naval warships was very fast. The warships purchased by Ottoman Turkey with huge sums of money have become completely outdated after 3 or 5 years. This means that in order to maintain the situation, the Navy needs to continuously spend money to purchase new warships to ensure that the Navy does not fall behind. Rather, it is indeed better to spend the money on the army. At worst, the army will not be in danger of not keeping up with the situation in 3 to 5 years. Therefore, since he succeeded to the throne, Hamid has the cheek to invite German officers, buy German-style ordnance, and form and train a new army according to the requirements of German advisors. Hamid has high hopes for this army now. It's all ruined, and it was defeated terribly by the hands of Greece that Hamid II had never seen before. The current Ottoman, who was torn off the last fig leaf by the Greeks, was exposed to the public and became the laughingstock of Europe. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 134, Negotiation Twists and Turns. Your Majesty, this is the end of the matter. The fact that the army has failed is irreversible. The Minister of War, seeing Hamid II's angry look, comforted him. Now, the negotiations between the two countries in London are already underway. Although Ottoman lost on the battlefield, but, Your Majesty, we may not be able to recover the lost territory at the negotiating table. In diplomacy, we must be proactive, and maybe there will be gains. Hamid II took a few deep breaths to ease his emotions. After calming down, he considered the Minister of War's proposal for diplomatic efforts. The more he thought about it, the more feasible it became. Among the territories currently occupied by Greece that belonged to the Ottoman Empire, Epirus needn't be considered. Most of that place was originally occupied by Greeks, but now it is occupied by the Greek army, and it is basically impossible to get it back. Epirus is not an important place. It is almost entirely mountainous, and there are no special minerals. Even the population is not large, so the loss is not large. The strategic location of Crete is important, and the Greeks are also in the majority, so it is basically impossible to get it back. However, Greece may not be able to get hold of this place. Currently, the international fleet cruising on Crete is still there, and all countries have ideas about this island. Albania and Macedonia are different. If nothing else, Italy would certainly strongly oppose the annexation of Albania by the Greeks. Serbia, a country next to Albania, will certainly object. As for Macedonia, Bulgaria and Serbia are both coveted. If it weren't for the big brothers of the two countries, Russia and Austria-Hungary sternly rejected the military plans of the two countries, I am afraid that they would have fallen to the ground. While the Ottoman Empire was unlucky, although the attitudes of Serbia and Bulgaria, the foreign powers will not care too much, but from the perspective of maintaining peace in the Balkans, dividing the Aegean coast of Macedonia occupied by Greece to Greece will undoubtedly stimulate the two countries. The more Haim thought about it, the more reasonable it became. Where do you think we should look for diplomatic help? Said Hamid, who calmed down. Your Majesty, there is a chance now. Did the Germans demand the construction of the Berlin-Baghdad railway, just using this as an excuse to ask the Germans to support the Ottomans diplomatically? Hearing the words, Hamid thought for a moment, then waved his hand to the servants in the palace, and ordered, summon the German embassy to come to Topkapi Palace to discuss matters. Although Greece has achieved a lot on the battlefield, it is innumerable until the powers recognize it. Ever since the Greek Prime Minister Trikoupis led a team and held talks in London at the request of the United Kingdom to negotiate with the Ottoman Empire on the issue of war, Constantine has been concerned the negotiations between Greece and the Ottomans became very complicated after the talks started. According to the principle of unanimous powers, the United Kingdom invited other major powers to come to London to discuss the territorial dispute between Greece and the Ottomans. Germany, France, Italy, Austria-Hungary, and Russia all sent envoys to London to participate in the talks on February 12. Constantine was invited by King George to go to the palace of the Constitution Square. It is said that Prime Minister Trikoupis sent back the situation of the talks by telegram. Constantine, who hurried to the meeting room of the palace, saw that the king and the chief of staff Emmanuel were already present. Also present was the leader of the opposition party in the Greek parliament, Delianis. After sitting down, Prime Minister Trikoupis's assistant, August Daciano, explained the specific content of the meeting to everyone. The talks were very difficult. In the early stage, the Grand Vizier of the Ottoman Empire stubbornly demanded that the Greek army unconditionally withdraw from the territory of the Ottoman Empire. August Daciano said strangely, it wasn't until all countries expressed their disapproval of Ottoman's absurd arguments that they softened their attitudes. However, the Grand Vizier still stated that he would not cede an inch of the Ottoman Empire, but he could hand over the entire Epirus region and the part of Macedonia close to Greece, excluding Thessaloniki, to Greece for management. Augustus Daciano said this, and all the occupied territories requested by Greece have been allocated, but the gap is huge. What's the attitude of the foreign powers? George asked with an ugly face. This feeling of handing over your destiny to others is really not a wonderful feeling. Obviously, the territory was recovered by the Greek army through war. If the foreign powers did not agree to give it to it, Greece would have no choice. Britain, France, Russia, and Austria-Hungary have a relatively clear attitude, urging us and the Ottomans to reach a unified opinion as soon as possible to maintain peace and stability in the Balkans. These four countries are not very interested in the specific division of territories, mainly Germany and Italy, with a very clear attitude, opposed to handing over the whole of Albania and Macedonia on the Aegean coast to Greece. As a Balkan country, Austria-Hungary has a complicated attitude towards Greece's claim to territory. On the one hand, Austria-Hungary regards the Balkans as the direction of its own expansion. Naturally, it does not want Greece to divide the Ottoman territory and grab meat from its own mouth. On the other hand, Austria-Hungary is happy to see the development and growth of Greece, a non-Slavic country in the Balkans. At the end of the 19th century, Russia expanded under the banner of Pan-Slavism, which made Austria-Hungary, a multi-ethnic country with a large number of Slavs, very disgusted and passive. The Ukrainians, Poles, Croats, Slovenes, and even Bosnia and Herzegovina, which was hosted by Austria-Hungary in 1881, were all Slavs. In the late 19th century, nationalism was in full swing and deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. The Pan-Slavism instigated by the Russians naturally caused panic among the Slavs in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Moreover, What made the Austro-Hungarian Empire even more vigilant was that reading www. The other two countries in the Balkans, Serbia and Bulgaria, are also two Slavic countries. If it weren't for the bitter lesson of the fiasco in the Crimean War, the Russians would have dared to swallow Serbia and Bulgaria and build a great Slavic empire. Once such a huge empire was built, it would be true that Rome would be alive, and European countries would probably tremble in front of the Russians. By then it is precisely because its strength is not as good as that of the Russians that Austria-Hungary actively formed an alliance with Germany in order to counteract Russia's mighty power in the Balkans. From the aspect of containing the Slavic forces, the development and growth of an un-Slavic country like Greece is in the interest of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Therefore, the attitude of the Austro-Hungarian Empire towards Greece's territorial claims became a bystander, neither for nor against. But why do the Germans have such a clear attitude and actively stand up for the Ottomans? King George said bitterly, although the relationship between Germany and the Ottomans has been close in recent years, is the relationship between Greece and Germany not bad? The Crown Princess of Greece, Sophie, is the sister of German Emperor Wilhelm II, and the two countries have frequent economic exchanges. From King George's point of view, it is expected that Greece would expand its territory and Italy would oppose it, but Germany has no reason. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 135, Stalemate. According to our embassy in Germany, recently, China is advocating the Eastern Railway in Germany. Will it have anything to do with this? Constantine guessed in Europe at the end of the 19th century, when people mentioned railways, one word would come to mind: war. The emergence of revolutionary land transportation tools such as railways has greatly promoted the flow of materials and personnel on land. Officers in the armies of various countries have a headache: how to transport huge amounts of supplies to frontline barracks, or thousands of people. The question of how quickly the military can get where they are needed is the answer to the question of the railroad. In the just concluded Theo War, the Athens-Larissa Railway played an important role in the course of the war. Every day there will be an army train, carrying thousands of tons of materials, including guns and weapons, bullets and shells, supplementary soldiers, army rations, etc., to the city of Larissa. It can be said that the Greek army was able to win the victory, thanks to the railway. After the advent of railroads, the Ottoman Empire had always wanted to build a railroad system that would link the various parts of the empire and strengthen control over the territory, preventing such things as Greek independence from happening again. Before that, almost all the railway projects in the Ottoman Empire were handed over to the Germans for construction due to the exhaustion of financial resources. Almost all the railways that the Ottomans have built so far are in Asia Minor. Hearing Constantine's reminder, King George also understood why Germany supported Ottoman at the ongoing London Conference. What about the attitude of the Russians? King George was in awe of the mighty Russia. Millions of grey animals, almost the whole of Europe, looked sideways because of the marriage. Queen Olga was from the Russian royal family. George, I had hope for Russia. The Russians don't have a definite attitude, Augustatiano replied. The Russians are now going all out to expand eastward in order to build the long Trans-Siberian Railway. It can be said that he has no time to worry about it. I heard that the cost of building the railway in Russia in recent years has even exceeded the annual military expenditure. Constantine added, this railway is known as the backbone of Russia, and received special attention from the Tsar. It is for this reason that Russia, which has always been ambitious, is the least willing to cause trouble at this stage. Originally, the Greek government, including Constantine, had high hopes for this meeting with Ottoman, but the current direction of the meeting is indeed not optimistic. A land like Greece that lacks resources and does not even have basic agricultural conditions is not suitable for industrialization, not to mention other things. In order to achieve the current industrial level, Greece spends quite a lot of money on transportation conditions, and Trikoupis' major infrastructure plan is mainly invested in this aspect. In other words, limited by resource endowments. The return on investment in Greece is too low if Greece can get the Aegean coast of Albania and Macedonia, let alone resources. At least Greece can get a part of the scarce arable land. This will solve the current dilemma that Greece needs to import a considerable portion of its food every year. The importance of food security to a country is self-evident, but now the Germans have crossed their feet, which is beyond Constantine's expectations. As for Italy's opposition, it seems that everyone is not too worried, so that King George asked about the attitude of the surrounding powers, but Italy was omitted at the current European military festival. There are two jokes circulating. One is Ottoman, who was defeated by his own country of origin. and the other is Italy, who was defeated by African chiefs almost at the same time that they defeated the Ottoman army on the border with the Greek army. European countries received news that in the Battle of Ajuga, the Italian army went deep alone and suffered a crushing defeat. 7,000 Italians were killed, 1,500 were injured, and 3,000 were captured, including 252 officers below the brigadier general. The Italian army commander Baratieri abandoned the army and fled at night. After the defeat of this decisive battle, the Italian expedition officially came to an end, in the form of shame. This is unprecedented in Europe. A European power lost to an African country at the end of the 19th century. The pride of Europeans reached its peak. Everyone's impression of African countries is that of a small number of European adventurers who used advanced European weapons to defeat a large number of African indigenous stories unexpectedly. I heard that tens of thousands of European soldiers in full armor were defeated by European black uncles. This strong contrast showed a strong drama. Bismarck commented, "Italians have a good appetite, but they have rotten teeth." Originally at the London meeting, the Italian representative with a strong attitude died instantly. Among the representatives of various countries participating in the meeting, almost no one paid attention to the Italian representative. For the territorial talks between Greece and the Ottoman Empire, the conditions for the double issue were too large. The Ottomans insisted that only Epirus should be handed over to Greece, while the Greek conditions were Epirus, Albania, the Aegean coast of Macedonia and Kerry Island. Ottoman was supported by Germany, while Greece was alone, and no representative of any country explicitly expressed support for Greece. The meeting ended in a stalemate. Rumors about the talks spread wildly among the people, causing a lot of speculation among the people. On February 25, the Times of Athens reported that Greek Prime Minister Trikoupis planned to return Macedonia and Albania occupied by Greece to Ottoman during the London talks. This caused a huge uproar in Athens. The Greeks who have gone through the war are now in a better mood, and they are thinking about how to restore the glory of the empire. www.wuxiaspit.com. Suddenly I heard that the Prime Minister will pay a huge price for the Greeks to return the territory they just got to the Ottomans, which is simply unacceptable. This kind of thing. Angry Athenians gathered in front of the capital and denounced Trikoupis as a traitor and betrayal of national interests. For a time, the Greek government was once again forced into a corner by the people. On the 27th, the Greek ambassador to Germany, Kritis, received a domestic request and visited the German Chief of General Staff. Kritis expressed that Greece is willing to pay for the technology of the 75mm rapid-fire gun, so that Germany will not support the Ottomans on the territorial issue. Schlieffen received news from German officers in the Ottoman army as early as when the two countries were fighting fiercely, saying that the Greek army was equipped with a field gun with a very high rate of fire. In fact, the matter of the Greek rapid-fire guns is no longer a secret in the European military circle. After all, they have already been on the battlefield. The military attachés stationed in Greece and the Ottomans from various countries are more or less concerned about the Greek artillery. Described in the report on February 29, the German military attaché in Athens, Madsen, who was ordered by Berlin, came to the school field in the suburbs of Athens in person, and with the help of Greek artillery, he personally operated the artillery. The 75mm gun can reach a limit rate of fire of more than 10 rounds per minute, which shocked Colonel Dedson. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136, Signed Protocol. After Colonel Dedson's report was sent to Berlin, the German envoy's attitude towards the London talks finally changed. Instead of standing entirely on the side of the Ottoman Empire, mediate between the two countries. Obviously, despite getting the benefits of Greece, the Germans are still unwilling to offend Ottoman completely and give up the strategic and commercial interests that this huge empire may bring. The Germans gave their mediation plan. Albania was no problem to be assigned to Greece, while Thessaloniki, an important commercial port on the Aegean Sea and a transportation hub in the Balkans, was still returned to the Ottoman Empire. The Greek army could obtain Macedonian territory on the side of the Thermaic Gulf, with a river flowing into the Thermaic Gulf as a new border between the two sides. As for Crete, the British gave advice, and the countries formed an international management committee to jointly manage Crete. The British Mediterranean Fleet is the strongest maritime force in the Mediterranean, although this is the British proposal, and no one dares to oppose it. As for Epirus, it was handed over to Greece. This plan is a step back from both sides. When the news came back to Athens, the people, The parliament, and even the army were very dissatisfied with the abandonment of the important city of Thessaloniki. Although most of the residents of this city are Jews, Greeks have become a minority as for Albania. Most of the residents in this area are MSL, and the Greek people don't value it at all. During the Eastern Roman Empire, the status of the city of Thessaloniki was much more important than that of Athens. When Greece became independent, Athens was already a small city with only tens of thousands of people, and it has long lost its glory in the Greek period. The army's complaints are easy to understand. For Thessaloniki, the army suffered heavy casualties. During the siege of Thessaloniki, the 1st Division defended here, with a total of more than 5,000 casualties during the defense of the city. Many of the residents in the city had aided the army. Now that the city that Greece intends to sign an agreement to give up, once it returns to the hands of Greece, the Greeks and Jews in the city who have cooperated with Greece will face Ottoman revenge. Despite this initial proposal and many problems, Trikoupis still believes that Greece cannot delay any longer and insists on signing the treaty. Since the outbreak of the war, Greece has been mobilizing for 2 or 3 months. If it continues to be delayed, it will have a serious impact on the Greek economy. At present, the Greek army has more than 100,000 troops, which are distributed in a vast area including Albania, Macedonia and Crete. If the agreement is not signed for a day, the daily consumption of the army is an astronomical figure, and the Ottoman Sultan, Hamid II, agreed to this plan after considering it. No matter what, the Germans still helped the Ottoman Empire to get back the important city of Thessaloniki. Epirus and Albania, under the Ottoman rule, are poor mountainous areas with rugged mountain roads and backward economy. Although the area is not small, when it comes to important, it is not enough to compare with the important city of Thessaloniki. Compared to among them, Epirus is still a place with scarce population even in the 21st century, let alone the Syria. Albania is only on the Adriatic coast. There are some coastal plains, and most of it is still hilly and barren with limited value. In the end, under the witness of various countries, Prime Minister Trikoupis, on behalf of the Greek government, formally signed an agreement with the Grand Vizier of the Ottoman Empire in London. The treaty stipulates, the Ottoman Empire handed over Albania, Epirus, and Macedonia along the Thermaic Gulf, with a total area of about 40,000 square kilometers and a population of about 500,000, to Greece. 2. Crete will be under the jurisdiction of the International Governing Council, and Greece can occupy 3 of the 9 Cretan commissioners. In total, the 3 parties did not seek compensation from each other, but the Ottoman Empire paid 10 million drachma as a ransom for nearly 80,000 Ottoman prisoners, including 65,000 in border battles and 15,000 in Epirus. 4. The Ottoman Empire agreed to treat Greek goods equally and not to adopt trade discrimination policies. After reading the specific terms of the treaty, Constantine let out a sigh of relief, and the war was finally over. The treaty can be said to have given enough face to the Ottoman Empire. There are no such insulting words as ceded, defeat and indemnity throughout the text. Even the 80,000 Ottoman prisoners only demanded 10 million drachmas. It can be seen that the major powers in Europe are still unwilling to see the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and cause turmoil in Europe. In contrast, Greece has also benefited a lot. Although the territory of 40,000 square kilometers seems small at first glance, however, after acquiring these territories, Greece's land area has almost doubled to about 90,000 square kilometers. With a population of 2.5 million, there are about 300,000 MSLs in the original and newly acquired territories of Greece. Moreover, the domestic economic contraction in Greece will also be improved and on the right track after Ottoman promised to lift trade restrictions after Prime Minister Trikoupis, on March 12, 1896, returned to Athens with the text of the treaty. It came into effect after the Greek parliament and the king considered it. Athens Ministry of Defense building. The high-level officials of the Greek army are sorting out various data of the army during the war. In terms of ammunition during the war, the 20 million mana bullets and 1.5 million artillery shells stored in the Northern Army before the war consumed 15 million mana ammunition and 1.1 million artillery shells respectively, said Armament Minister Giannis. In terms of mobilizing soldiers, there were 100,000 native Greek soldiers and 40,000 people in the Quengalese area. Among them, about 30,000 Greek soldiers suffered casualties and 10,000 Quengalese soldiers. How much did this war cost? Constantine asked curiously. www.uxiaspit.com. He helped the glasses on the bridge of his nose, and Giannis said, about 190 million drachmas, that's not counting the ensuing pensions for killed and wounded soldiers. Hearing this number, everyone present couldn't help stunned. The war lasted no more than 3 months, but it cost the Greek government almost more than a year of fiscal revenue. The General Staff is directing the Greek army to withdraw from the city of Thessaloniki to Greek territory. It's time to dismiss the temporary conscripts in the army, King George arranged. According to the plan, the number of the Greek army will reach 60,000 after returning to normal, compared with the previous one, expanding a standing division. The troops of 2 of the divisions will be deployed in Albania. On March 5, at the port of Piraeus, Constantine, together with Brute, personally bid farewell to the Quengalese army. This time the Quengalese army played a major role. If it weren't for the sudden strengthening of the Greek army, the emergence of 40,000 Quengalese troops, disrupting the frontline deployment of the Ottoman army, and allowing the Greek army to find an opportunity, the outcome of this war is still full of variables. During the battle, the bravery of the Quengalese soldiers was also recognized by the officers of the Greek army, although this was under the command of Greek officers. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 137, Military Nobles. Due to the outstanding contributions of the Quengalese indigenous soldiers, when he saw the wounded indigenous soldiers wrapped in white bandages, either on crutches or on stretchers, struggling to board the ship heading for the Congo, Constantine was heartbroken. Compassion, he wrote a letter to ask Quengalese Governor Banning to treat the injured indigenous soldiers kindly. The content is as follows. The soldiers of the Congo Kingdom governed by His Excellency Governor Banning defended the dignity of their monarch, His Majesty Constantine, fought bravely for their monarch, and won the monarch's approval. Thousands of people are being tortured and maimed. If these poor soldiers can be treated justly and generously, I will be sincerely pleased. Constantine. This letter will be handed over to Banning to find a job where he can for these disabled soldiers fighting on the battlefield, rather than being discarded like a drained lemon in an unnoticed place corner. It's not that Constantine was hypocritical. Such a move was out of consideration for future wars. Greece is a broken place, located in the powder keg of Europe, the Balkan Peninsula. How many times will it face wars in the future? After a certain period of training, these Quengalese soldiers can be used as infantry, which is very cost-effective. In contrast, Greece has a sparse population. After the Foundation popularized compulsory education, almost all Greek school-age children have received a complete primary education. Using such soldiers and illiterate cannon fodder from other countries to go shopping is not technical. The type of arms made Constantine always feel a little disadvantaged in this war. The literacy rate among Greek native soldiers reached 78%, far exceeding the 30% of the Ottoman Empire. Such soldiers can play a greater role in economic production, although troops composed of high-quality soldiers have a higher level of combat. In order to save manpower, it is a good method to use Quengalese soldiers to enter the army. Greek Prime Minister Trikoupis, after he signed the controversial London Treaty, was criticized in Parliament for being too weak, succumbing to the Ottomans, taking Greece's costly war gains as the worst. One piece was returned to Osman, and such behavior is debatable. There are also complaints from the people about this result. The fuse of this incident, Crete did not explicitly realize the merger with Greece, but was handed over to international supervision. In the impression of most people, the cost of this war is high, but the receipt of goods is very small under great pressure. Trikoupis, who is also very old, formally submitted his resignation application to King George in the council chamber of the Palace of the Constitution Square. Constantine, who was standing beside King George, was very surprised to see the resolute attitude of the Prime Minister. Prime Minister Trikoupis, are they putting too much pressure? King George asked. Trikoupis shook his head with a look of reminiscence on his face. Your Majesty, I have been in politics for more than 30 years, from a newspaper reporter back then to being a member of Parliament. With the cooperation of Crown Prince Constantine, a series of policies implemented in Greece to accelerate the development of Greek industrialization. Otherwise, Greece would not be able to win this victory. Trikoupis sighed. After signing the London Treaty, I feel extremely relieved for some reason. It seems that the hard work spent over the past 30 years has finally paid off. When dealing with those trivial documents, I have no motivation. Standing in front of the king's desk, Trikoupis said calmly, now, if I don't delay it, it will only delay the state affairs of Greece. After seeing Trikoupis' firm attitude, King George, who had no choice, had to approve his resignation. To be fair, during Trikoupis' tenure as Prime Minister, he reorganized the finances, built railways and roads, developed industry, built the Greek army and navy, and expanded public education. Greece has some government-run schools, independent of the royal foundation. The action is not too big. However, The cost of his policy measures was very high, almost all of which was done by borrowing, and the financial expenditure was too huge. Historically, Greece went bankrupt in 1892, and he has an inescapable responsibility in the later period of his administration. The drawbacks of this model were already very obvious. A considerable part of the Greek fiscal revenue is used to repay the interest of foreign creditors every year. If it wasn't for Constantine's reliance on diplomatic means to obtain the management rights of the Congolese colony for Greece, which gave Greece an additional source of funds, Greece would still not be able to escape the fate of bankruptcy. In the history of the original time and space following the resignation of Trikoupis, the Greek parliament finally elected Alexandros Chamias as the prime minister of Greece as soon as Pou took office. The new prime minister was faced with a thorny issue. Crown Prince Constantine submitted the canonization list to the parliament, and the royal family announced that several officers who had outstanding performance in the 1896 war and laid the foundation for the victory of the Greek army would become nobles to inspire the Greek army to fight bravely. It was the first time in Greece that the canonization of nobility had occurred. Due to the special history of Greece, there are no noble families with a long history in mainland Greece so far. All the nobles in Greece are limited to the king's family, and nothing else. This has led to the fact that although Greece is a kingdom, the domestic social form is more like a republic. Especially after the Greek constitution was approved by King George. www.uxiaspit.com. Except for the early period when the state management of Greece was not on the right track, interference in addition to domestic affairs, government affairs were released. And almost all of them were handed over to the prime minister elected by the parliament after Greece became independent. There has been no war in Greece in recent years, and naturally no one will get a title because of military exploits. Although the number of people to be awarded the title is not large, it still caused heated discussions in the Greek society. The list drawn up by Constantine was Benning and Brute. They pioneered and managed the Congo colony for Greece. This time, the Congolese indigenous army became an important force for Greece to defeat the Ottoman Empire. Manu Gianaski, during the war, led the Greek First Division, and under the absolute advantage of the enemy twice as much as himself, he firmly defended Thessaloniki, creating conditions for the main force of the Greek army to completely wipe out the enemy Macedonian legion. The Greek army was able to win, and its credit was great. Colonel Kontaretis of the Navy, during the war, commanded the Greek Navy to raid the city of Thessaloniki, which was weakly defended by the enemy, successfully breaking the deadlock of the war, and effectively controlled the Sea of the Aegean Sea. With outstanding achievements, the list sparked a backlash in the Greek parliament as to whether the aristocratic system, a feudal system with a long history, should be restored when it is about to enter the 20th century. Today, it has become the focus of debate. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 138, King and Council. In the Greek parliament, after the canonization of nobility had been fermenting for a period of time, finally Alexandros, the new prime minister of Greece, gave a solution. The king could canonize nobility, but the conditions must be met. First, the nobility of Greece without privilege. Secondly, the nobles of Greece cannot hold the office of prime minister. In other words, the nobles of Greece did not have any obvious privileges, but they were still restricted. This is also the limit that Greek society can tolerate. After all, it was already 1896. Suddenly, a new class, the nobility, appeared in Greek society, which made most of the people feel very uncomfortable and dwarfed them out of thin air. The parliament also has its own reasons for providing such a scheme of aristocracy with limited rights. Although the people on the canonization list have indeed contributed to the victory of the Greek war, in the final analysis, the victory of the war is still due to the contribution of the Greek people. 10,000 people went to the battlefield, and the taxes they paid were regarded as military expenses. All the expenses of the army, food and clothing, guns and ammunition, were all provided by the Greek people. As for the victory of the war, it should also be the Greek people. It's not the officers' turn yet. In Constantine, who pushed for military merit and knighthood, also had his own reasons. First of all, it is for the benefit of the Greek royal family. In a country where only the king is a noble, the monarch is always in a weak position. After all, there are no nobles around, so he is alone and alone, giving people a feeling of rootless duckweed. In current Greece, the main power and influence of the royal family is concentrated in the army. In the army, the royal family holds great power, especially after the victory of this war against the Ottoman Empire. The power of the royal family in the army has risen even more, and Parliament is the Prime Minister's home. Although King George has the right to interfere in politics, during the normal operation of the country, The king will interfere in government affairs at will and will be rejected by the entire parliament. After all, members of parliament are elected by the people and represent public opinion. This move is very risky. Generally speaking, in Greece's current power structure, the parliament is the home of the prime minister, and the army is the basic plate of the royal family. Although the rights of the two parties are not distinct, they are basically distributed in this way that decides the head. In order to stabilize the royal family and maintain the influence of the royal family in the army, Constantine, who was born in the royal family, was only able to promote military merit and knighthood. In the future wars, the scale of the war will be far more than 100,000. In order to deal with the threat of the enemy country, the Greek army will be greatly expanded. In this situation, a large number of civilians will enter the army, and a group of civilian officers will naturally flood in among the officers. This situation has many disadvantages for the isolated royal family. On the contrary, the influence of the parliament and the military will become larger and larger. Aristocratic officers are different. Nobles are naturally aligned with the interests of the royal family. Second, it is the system of military merit and nobility, which can indeed improve the combat effectiveness of the army. The knighthood system for military merit can motivate the officers who command the army and increase their enthusiasm. In addition, the army is not a suitable place for democratization. In fact, in every country, whether you are a republic or an autocratic monarchy, the army is a place with strict classes. What the army needs is obedience, orders and prohibitions, courage to fight, not peace. In the armies of various countries in Europe, the nobility is the guarantee of the army's combat effectiveness. The aristocratic and hereditary officers of the officers are beneficial to improve the combat effectiveness of the army. In this respect, the example of Prussia is clear. The Junker noble officers of Prussia have a tradition of serving in the army for generations. This tradition can often be traced back to more than 10 or even 20 generations. There is a word in China called Zhengdu heirloom. It should be changed in Prussia, and it is called Gungen heirloom. Most of the famous German generals on the battlefield later came from the Junkers aristocracy. Officers from such a family are familiar with the environment and influenced by the environment. They have received military education from their elders since childhood. This kind of education is lacking in officers from civilians. In Napoleon's words, Prussians are hatched from shells. It can be seen from the side that the fighting will of the Prussian Junker nobles commanded the army. It was for these reasons that Constantine persuaded King George to restore the aristocracy in Greece. Parliament certainly had reason to worry about aristocracy. With the advent of the Greek nobility, the power of the king might expand in the government, and it might even evolve into the despotisms practiced by other European monarchies after the victory of the war. The fact that the prestige of the royal family has soared made it difficult for the parliament to directly reject the king's will. Although it agreed to the title, it restricted the rights of the nobles, and wanted to make the title of nobles only an honor system. After all, nobles without privileges are like toothless tigers. It can be said that both parties have their own plans for the canonization of nobles. The royal family and parliament have steps to descend. Although it is a shrinking noble, it is also a victory for the royal family. On April 21, 1896, King George I of Greece officially held a canonization ceremony in the royal palace on Syntagma Square. In the palace chamber, with a golden olive crown on his head, a long sword hanging from his waist sash, and a gorgeous robe, King George I stood on the royal steps in front of the golden throne with a serious expression. A group of powerful Greek figures, archbishops, members of parliament, prime ministers, and regional, similar to provincial, officials stood around the throne. At the foot of the royal steps, Manu Gianarski respectfully knelt on the black silk mat with his head lowered, looking reverent. Looking around, King George Lang said, "This canonization aims to encourage those who have contributed to Greece, and I hope you gentlemen will continue to work hard, do your best for the revival of Greece, and make greater contributions." After saying that, he walked slowly to Manu Gianarski, and with a bang, he drew out a bright silver sword from his waist. You reading www.uucanshu.com put the blade on the left shoulder of Manu Gianarski, who was kneeling on the ground, and solemnly said, "I gave you the sword, not for you to kill, but for you to remember that you must be loyal to your country. I don't want you to make a profit by giving you the ring, but I hope you will remember your honorable identity. Now, I grant you my most honorable trust. What you get is not only supreme power and status, but irreplaceable responsibility. May you fight for the great ideals of Greece. What my sword points to is the direction you are heading." Manu Gianarski, who stood with his head bowed at the foot of the steps, solemnly swears, "I, Manu Gianarski, solemnly swear, loyalty is my honor, and upholding justice is my mission. My honor is not to wear a crown, but to sacrifice my life for my country." My job is not to make money, but to fight bandits for my beliefs. I dedicate my life to my country, my faith and my people. This is what I swear today, and this is what I will abide by in this life." Next, the other three received the canonization in turn, becoming the first group of nobles in Greece who were not from the royal family. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 139, Albania. After the war, the first problem to be solved by the new Prime Minister of Greece, in addition to the messy financial problem, is the digestion and absorption of the newly acquired territory of Greece. With the permission of King George, the new government officially entrusted the three major banks of Greece, the Royal Bank of Greece, the National Bank of Greece, and Alpha Bank, to issue 50 million drachma of national debt in order to alleviate the financial difficulties among them. The Royal Bank of Greece, that is, after the funds of the Royal Educational Foundation became more and more complicated, Constantine appointed the executive director of the Educational Foundation. The bank created by Calidus was originally only to solve the trouble of capital flow. The source of funding for the Royal Greek Education Foundation is 10% of the Congolese government's fiscal revenue. The amount of this money in 1896 was 500,000 British pounds, or about 12.5 million drachmas. In addition, according to the original agreement, the 5% of the Congolese fiscal revenue received by the Greek royal family every year will be directly deposited into the royal family's account in the Royal Bank. After more than 10 years of development, the Royal Bank of Greece has grown stronger day by day with the help of the deep resources behind the royal family, especially with the influence of Constantine. The upstream and downstream enterprises of the Greek cotton textile industry, the steel industry, and the giant enterprise of the Greek Congo General Corporation. The current funds of these enterprises are generally transferred through the Royal Bank. It is by virtue of such unique advantages that in recent years, Royal Bank has emerged in the Greek financial circle. Together with the deeply rooted Alpha and the National Bank of Greece, the three have become the three largest banks in Greece with strong financial strength, especially in recent years. After Greece acquired the Congo colony, the industry and commerce developed rapidly, and the Alpha Bank and the National Bank of Greece also shared a lot of benefits with the growth of the Royal Bank. The Greek royal family now has a considerable right to speak in the financial world. Syntagma Square conference room. For the first time, the new Prime Minister Alexandros attended the Imperial Council to discuss how to absorb and digest the newly acquired territories. Among the newly acquired territories of Greece, the most difficult one at present is Albania, Alexandros said to the crowd. After all, he looked at the confused King George and said softly, "Your Majesty." Seeing that everyone's eyes were on him, King George rubbed his face with his hands to cheer himself up. After the victory of the war in 1896, even King George's desire to participate in government gradually disappeared. Now this old man, after getting up every day, does not bring guards. Just like a retired old man, he runs to the streets and greets people enthusiastically. Affected by this, the Greek royal family had a wave of goodwill among the Greeks, especially the goodwill of the Athenian people. At least in 1896, when the feudal monarch was still under his power, such a down-to-earth king was rare in Europe. Therefore, the constitutional monarchy also has its advantages, and King George must have felt this. There is no need to do anything. The king will do it. Everyone follows the established rules to maintain the normal operation of the country. Go on, Prime Minister, I'm listening. King George woke up looking at Constantine's helpless shrug. Prime Minister Alexandros had to continue. Albania covers an area of about 28,000 square kilometers, 3/4 of which are mountains and hills, and the Adriatic coast is part of the region. The plain, which concentrates most of the arable land in the region. The coastal plain area is also the most economically active place in Albania. The majority of the population also lives here. The total population of the region is about 300,000, of which 240,000 MSL, and the rest are Orthodox and Catholics. Prime Minister Alexandros introduced the basic situation of Albania to everyone. So far, the Greek army has maintained about 15,000 troops in Afghanistan. The current situation is that in order to stabilize Greece's control over Albania, the government needs to strengthen the connection between mainland Greece and Albania. The best way is to build a railway to connect Greece and Albania. Having said that, Alexandros looked at everyone present. In this way, Epirus, which is located between Albania and Greece, can also pass through the railway. The most optimistic railway plan of the government is to connect Trerica, a city in north-central Greece, which is already connected to the railway in northern Greece, and the railway line will continue to extend northward, passing through Ioannina, the capital of Epirus, and Albania Vlora in the south, Tirana in the center, up to the northern part of Afghanistan. Everyone understands that in order to effectively control the region of Afghanistan, it is indeed necessary to build this railway, but building a railway requires a lot of capital investment. After such a war, the Greek economy is still in the recovery period. Now the Greek government is still relying on borrowing to maintain it, and it really can't come up with extra money. Albania is the most valuable piece of land that Greece got from the Ottomans this time. It is large enough and also has some arable land and minerals. Moreover, Albania is adjacent to the Adriatic Sea. There are many excellent ports along the coast. In addition to the huge investment in the early stage, the prospects are still promising. When everyone heard the situation in Albania, they could not help frowning, judging from the experience of former Prime Minister Turkoupis investing in Greek infrastructure. If the Albania region wants to generate income, it is estimated that the investment will also go to Greece, which means that this amount may reach hundreds of millions of drachmas. Constantine thought about the information about Albania and encouraged everyone. Is there a good side? Although there are more than 200,000 MSL in Albania, the Albanians do not have their own words, which is very important for the assimilation of the Albanians by Greece. Is a benefit also. From a historical point of view, the relationship between Albania and the Greeks is quite good, Constantine said to everyone who calmed down when the Prime Minister mentioned money. www.wuxiaspit.com. Although the word Greece is mentioned, people will think of the splendid ancient Greek civilization, thus linking modern Greece with ancient Greece. But the ancient Greeks may have nothing to do with the so-called Greeks living in Greece in the 21st century. Relation. Historically, the Greek region was conquered by ancient Rome and ruled for a long time until the fall of the Eastern Roman Empire. During this long period of time, Greece has been massacred several times. For example, Athens, the most famous city in Greece, has recorded several massacres, so much so that some sociologists and historians say, not a drop of blood in the veins of modern Greeks belongs to the ancient Greeks. The ancient Greeks may have literally been buried in the dust of history in terms of blood. The people who lived in the land of Greece in later generations were closer to the blood of Albanians and Slavs. Moreover, in the Greek War of Independence, many Albanians participated, and there were also many Albanian Orthodox Christians in Greece. Therefore, the relationship between Greece and Albania is not bad. Constantine's so-called historical factors did not just refer to these. The Ottoman Empire's conquest of Albania was also a story of ups and downs. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 140, The History of Oil. In the original time and space, Albania, a small European country, had a very special flag, a black double-headed eagle. This flag comes from Skanderbeg. Historically, the Ottoman Empire's conquest of Albania was full of twists and turns. During the Albanian rebellion against the Ottoman Empire, a national hero, Skanderbeg, appeared in Albania. This person was born in an Eastern Roman nobleman. At first, he joined the command of the Ottoman Sultan Murad II. Later, he rebelled and returned to his native Albania under the leadership of Skanderbeg. Albania was an Ottoman nemesis. Facing the thriving Ottomans in the 15th century, Albania was victorious in a legendary battle between the two sides, the Siege of Kruia. 8,000 people from Skanderbeg fought against 100,000 people of the Ottoman Sultan Murad II, and they won the battle. After that, during the more than 20 years that Skanderbeg was alive, Albania, led by Skanderbeg, maintained its independence. It was not until Osman heard that Skanderbeg died of illness that he led an army of 100,000 to conquer Albania again in order to vent their anger. The Albanians were almost slaughtered by the Ottomans at that time, which is why in Albania later, MSL accounted for the majority, because almost all the original Albanians were killed. The black double-headed eagle in Albania in later generations is not only the family crest of Skanderbeg, but also the symbol of Eastern Rome. It can be said that the lost population of Albania has not recovered during the 400 years of Ottoman rule. Albania covers an area of more than 20,000 square kilometers and has a poor population of only 300,000 people. Why else would Italy be so coveted by Albania? A piece of land just under the nose, with a sparse population, is also located in Europe, with a short distance separated by the Otranto Strait. For Italy, no colony compares to Albania. In Italy, where hundreds of thousands of people immigrate to the Americas every year, it is impossible not to pay attention to places like Albania. If it weren't for the failure of the Italian expedition to Ethiopia, the domestic political chaos was in a mess, and if Greece wanted to get this land, it would be almost impossible for Italy to pass the test against such a historical background, despite the fact that the Albanians have the majority of the MSL population. It is hard to say how much they have feelings for the Ottomans. These are what Constantine called historical factors. From this point of view, it is more advantageous for Greece to assimilate the Albanians. In addition, Prime Minister Alexandros, you can also send a resource exploration team to find out the details of Albania's minerals and see if there are any valuable mineral resources for development. Constantine said to the crowd, thanks to the industrial level of Ottoman slag, no matter what minerals there are, they are still buried in the ground intact for today's Greece. Due to the lack of high-quality hard coal, Greek coal is lignite, whether it is raw material for steel making or thermal coal for trains. The coal imported every year is a huge sum of money, allowing the British to make money earned with a smile if it weren't for the considerable trade volume of Greece every year. How could the British people talk so well at the London conference? Not to mention, if you can find a high-quality hard coal mine in Albania, and how much to invest, the Greek financial community is probably willing to pay for it for bankers. Nothing is more heart-wrenching than the outflow of gold and silver for the capitalists of a certain country. As long as the money remains in the country, they will continue to generate income for the capitalists. Once the money leaves the country, it is beyond their ability. Therefore, everyone's eyes lit up when they heard about mineral exploration. In the garden of the Tatoi Palace, Nobel, who was invited, hurried to the appointment. This big man has now become a Greek industrial tycoon. Almost all the gunpowder of the Greek army is contracted by Nobel's factory in Greece. Without Nobel's gunpowder, the Greek army could not have won on the battlefield. In addition, there is also the dye business, which also makes the chemical tycoon more valuable at present. The dyes required by the Greek textile industry, except for imports, almost all come from Nobel's chemical plants. This scientist plus factory owner Nobel, since he came to Greece to set up a factory, knew that the importance of chemical industry was very important, and Constantine took care of him almost everywhere, giving him a green light all the way, and Nobel also reciprocated. Almost all of his business funds in Greece are stored in the royal bank of the royal family, which is the second important customer of the royal bank besides the royal family. This kind of interest relationship makes the relationship between the two parties more harmonious. His Royal Highness, congratulations on your army's victory. Seeing Constantine standing up to greet him in person, Nobel congratulated, you also have a share of the victory, Constantine replied, welcoming Nobel to the table. At the same time, Nobel was stunned for a moment, then thought that Constantine was the gunpowder used by the Greek army. After the two sides were seated, the servants brought refreshments and then stepped back. Your Highness, you came to me this time, what can I help you with? Nobel said directly, that's right, Mr. Nobel, I heard that your family is in the oil industry. Constantine said without hesitation, if you don't feel offended, Mr. Nobel, can I listen to the history of your Nobel family? Constantine asked with interest. Constantine was really curious about the history of the Nobel family, a newly rising wealthy family that started from scratch. The Nobel Prize, which everyone knows later, comes from this Nobel, but the Nobel family, who came from Nobel, should not be underestimated either. They were the originator of the Russian oil industry and made their fortune on oil almost at the same time as Rockefeller in the United States. Nobel obviously did not expect that Constantine would ask about his family, but the relationship between the two was close, so he organized the language and said, there's nothing wrong with that, that's right, Your Highness. Our Nobel family originally came from Sweden. Later, my father brought the whole family to Russia. My father Emmanuel met the then Russian Tsar Nicholas I by chance. Through this relationship, we initially opened an armament factory, producing mines, steam locomotives, etc. However, after the Crimean War, Russia was defeated, and my father's factory also encountered difficulties and was finally sold. My second brother, Ludwig, took the money to open a factory again to produce firearms. Later, my eldest brother Robert went to Baku on the Caspian Sea to buy walnut wood for guns. Speaking of this, Nobel shook his head and smiled bitterly. I don't know what my elder brother www.uxiaspit.com Robert thought at that time. The money that should have been used to buy walnut wood, 25,000 rubles, bought a small oil refinery on his own initiative. And my second brother, Ludwig, not only didn't get angry, but continued to send money to let Robert upgrade all the equipment in the factory, refinery. Business is booming due to good quality. Families also made their fortunes from the oil business. At that time, the oil industry in the United States was the most advanced, but the efforts of your family turned the situation around. Constantine interjected, the modern oil industry originated in the United States. Nobel looked at Constantine and asked curiously, does your highness know so much about the history of the oil industry? Constantine shook his head. When I was in New York, I met Rockefeller, The American oil tycoon. These words, I listened to him, Nobel, came to a sudden realization both the Rockefeller family and the Nobel family are engaged in the oil business, so naturally they know each other. It turns out that it's not surprising. In fact, Rockefeller's Standard Oil and our Nobel family's oil company are commercial competitors. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 141, Oil and Motorcycles. The Second Industrial Revolution in Europe is in full swing. The development of the electric power industry and the wide application of internal combustion engines are the main features of this industrial revolution in terms of electricity. Although the quality of Greek coal is worrying, it has finally kept up with the tide of the times. The current electricity development in Greece is rapid. In Athens, light bulbs are already a common lighting facility. The internal combustion engine that consumes oil, whether it is a diesel engine or a gasoline engine, has now been invented. This also made Constantine interested in oil in the current world oil market. American oil and Russian oil mainly occupy the market, of which the United States accounts for 70% and Russia 30%. It is precisely by relying on oil that the Russians have achieved financial balance in the near future. Therefore, the Russians also have a fine tradition of living by selling oil. American oil is exported to Europe, but it needs to cross the Atlantic Ocean, and the journey is long. In the European market, your Baku oil should have an advantage. Under these conditions, the lighting kerosene in the United States should not be able to compete with your kerosene in Baku, right? Constantine asked inexplicably with a half-smile. Noble picked up the teacup to moisten his throat. Your Highness, you don't know anything about it, you said. If the same barrel of kerosene, for lighting, is transported to St. Petersburg, is it cheaper to ship from Baku to St. Petersburg, or cheaper from New York port to St. Petersburg? Nobel did not wait for Constantine to answer, and continued, from the map, the distance between Baku and St. Petersburg is much closer. However, due to the poor level of transportation, the transportation cost of oil in Baku is about twice as high as in the United States. And from the east coast of the United States to Western Europe, the vast Atlantic Ocean is unimpeded along the way, and the merchant ships from the Black Sea to Western Europe are different. They have to pass through the Bosphorus Strait, the Dardanelles Strait, and the Strait of Gibraltar one after another. Nobel sighed. None of these straits are places that are extremely vulnerable to political influence. After listening to such a big talk about Nobel, Constantine felt that the Nobel family was very talented in chemistry. Nobel looked at Constantine and couldn't help but ask, Your Highness, why are you asking so much about oil? Your Nobel family has also been engaged in the oil industry for decades and has rich experience. Constantine is not hiding the reason for inviting Nobel. I want to rent an oil drilling team from your Nobel family. Go to Albania to explore for oil. Hearing Constantine's answer, Nobel suddenly realized, so it is. That's not a problem. I'll help your Highness to contact you. The nearest Greek machinery factory, after the war, was producing guns and guns. After hearing from Constantine that there would be no war in Europe in the near future, the manager of the factory, Scaloi, intends to transfer the production capacity of the factory to the production of bicycles and motorcycles. When the Greek Minister of Armaments, Yanis, summed up his experience after the war, he once responded to Constantine that motorcycles or bicycles could be properly used in the Greek army to partially replace the role of horses in the War of 1896. Due to the positional warfare between the two sides, the Greek cavalry had little achievements, and its role was far from matching the expensive cost of building the cavalry. Military horses are very delicate animals. The food consumed by a military horse every day is on top of the rations of 5 soldiers, and it must be concentrated feed. At the same time, in the cavalry unit, there must also be a veterinarian stationed on the field, ready to serve these baby bumps at any time to prevent the occurrence of epidemics. If something goes wrong, it will die for you to see. The Army Chief of Staff Emmanuel also reported a similar problem to Constantine. The cavalry built before the war did not have the expected effect, especially in the Battle of Thessaloniki where the Maxim heavy machine gun was equipped. The cavalry officers looked at each other in dismay after seeing the rate of fire of this weapon. After the Ottoman army was heavily equipped with German rifles, even the traditional infantry had an unprecedentedly dense rate of fire on the battlefield. The cavalry has a large target and is easily hit by enemy shells or bullets. Therefore, people of insight in the Greek army also realized that the embarrassment of cavalry on the battlefield in the future, the cavalry unit established with a lot of military expenditure. is not very useful now that the army realized the plight of the cavalry. Constantine was happy to see it considering the trend of the Industrial Revolution. Constantine was also very willing to see a large number of internal combustion engines entering people's production and life in Greece. However, such a thing as a car, relying on the industrial volume of Greece, will definitely not be able to do it. First, the car market in Greece is small, and now Greece has a population of more than 2 million, and even fewer people can afford to drive a car, and it is impossible to support the car industry at all now, and for some time to come, the car will be a luxury, except for those with deep pockets. Second, a car is made up of thousands of parts. How can there be so many factories in Greece to produce such a large number of parts? Therefore, compared with cars, motorcycles with much simpler structures naturally entered the eyes of Constantine. According to Greece's national conditions, cars cannot afford to play at present, and motorcycles are still no problem. Motorcycles in this era are almost the same as bicycles. If you ignore the gasoline engine on the pedals on the motorcycle, the technical level is simple, and it can allow the Greek industry to catch up with the east wind of the internal combustion engine revolution. Naturally, Constantine was also interested in the motorcycle business in Greece. Even a shrunken version of the internal combustion engine revolution is crucial to promoting the development of Greek industry. After Constantine advocated the first promotion of alternating current in Greece, Greece has caught up with the world trend in the development of the power industry. And another sign of the second industrial revolution, the internal combustion engine, Greece is also catching up. After communicating with Stanley, Constantine decided to promote motorcycles in Greece. The first is that the Greek army purchased a batch of motorcycles and entered military service in this way. Oil, the source of engine energy for motorcycles. www.uxiaspit.com naturally entered Constantine's field of vision. In fact, at the end of the 19th century, gasoline was very cheap because there are not many applications for gasoline. Not only that, people have to worry about the possible explosion caused by the gasoline mixed with the purchased lighting kerosene in the eyes of the person in charge of the oil refinery. At the end of the 19th century, how to deal with gasoline was a headache, and there was a safety hazard in storage. In the process of smelting oil, the byproduct, gasoline, could only be thrown away. The waste of gasoline continued until the beginning of the 20th century, when the automobile industry developed. This is also one of the reasons why Constantine took a fancy to motorcycles. Using gasoline engines, the gasoline used is cheap and the Greeks can afford them. In these cases, motorcycles are ideal to start Greece's internal combustion engine revolution. It just so happened that Constantine remembered that in the original time and space, the Italians discovered oil in Albania in 1928. Since Albania is now a territory of Greece, it just took this opportunity to start the oil industry in Greece. While Constantine and Nobel were chatting, Crown Princess Sophie suddenly came over, pulled out a chair and sat down. Mr. Nobel, I heard that you are planning to set up an award recently to reward those scientific workers who have made outstanding contributions to mankind. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 142, Nobel Prize? Seeing Crown Princess Sophie, who suddenly joined the chat, Nobel sighed and replied, I have this plan in the near future. I'm tired of it. The greatest achievement in my life is gunpowder. As you can see, I also made a fortune because of the production of gunpowder. My time is short and I have no children. These riches make me feel more and more guilty. Speaking of this, Nobel looked at Constantine. So, Your Highness, don't take my credit for your victory. I might be happier that way. Obviously, Nobel felt moral pressure for his invention dynamite, which was widely used in wars and killed thousands of his kind, especially in France. French public opinion got Nobel and his brother Ludwig wrong. When his brother Ludwig died, he even published in the newspaper invented a thing for war, dynamite. This kind of stuff has brought a lot of death and destruction. The shrewd obituary this gave Nobel a great touch and blow. Nobel himself is not married, naturally has no heirs, and has no direct heir to his wealth. All these make Nobel's intention to retire. As Her Royal Highness the Crown Princess said, I intend to use the vast majority of my fortune, about $9.2 million, to set up an award to inspire those who have made outstanding contributions to science. Maybe this will save me. Nobel exclaimed. After all, she looked at Sophie and joked, if this award is successfully established, I intend to personally award you the title of the greatest woman in the world. Nobel's recent decision to donate most of his fortune to the establishment of the prize was also inspired by the Royal Greek Educational Foundation. Nobel has been in Greece for several years, and his impression of Greece is ordinary, but there is only one thing in Greece that makes him feel heartfelt. The Royal Greek Education Foundation spends huge amounts of money every year to fund thousands of students, complete the great act of primary education. The wide range of its funding, the number of funded people, and the amount of money spent each year make Nobel's heartfelt admiration for the president of the foundation, Crown Princess Sophie. It can be said that, looking at human history, there are very few acts of kindness that benefit the people since Sophie took over the management of the Royal Education Foundation and became the president of the foundation. She liked this job from the bottom of her heart, helping thousands of children, especially those from poor families, come to the school for education. So far, more than 180,000 students have completed their preliminary studies in Greece under the sponsorship of the foundation, and 120,000 are receiving primary education in primary schools. The sense of self-satisfaction and achievement brought by this job allows Crown Princess Sophie to devote herself to the work of the foundation energetically even if she is not paid. Sophie. There is no salary for the work in the foundation. Due to his years of education, Sophie has a good reputation in Greek society, and has a tendency to overpower Constantine, even though he personally led the army to defeat the ancient enemy Ottoman's army on the battlefield. In Greek newspapers, there are many words praising the Crown Princess Sophie, such as a woman like the Virgin Mary and light of wisdom. What made Constantine even more interesting was that there were also newspaper comments that the Greek army led by Crown Prince Constantine was able to defeat Ottoman on the battlefield because of the Crown Princess Sophie. Apparently, such a statement is influenced by Greek folklore. When a Greek king named Constantine married a queen named Sophie, would again rule over his namesake city, referring to Constantinople. Sophie means wisdom and wise man in Greek. The main goal of Sophie's foundation work is to support students to complete their studies, and let the Greeks connect Sophie with the meaning of Sophie in Greek. Nobel's determination to use his property to set up awards is also partly inspired by the foundation's actions. Nobel himself also has great respect for Crown Princess Sophie, who is engaged in education after seeing the good deeds of the foundation. Nobel believed that his wealth with blood would be meaningful to use for some causes that benefit the whole mankind. Although his wealth is dwarfed by the foundation, it can also play a unique value, rewarding and helping the brightest minds in human society. Since he has been engaged in education and culture for a long time, Nobel's plan naturally fell into Sophie's ears. After hearing the affirmative answer from Nobel, Sophie said happily, "Mr. Nobel, this is really a generous act. If you make up your mind to do that, can you place the award in Greece? I think there is no more suitable place for such an award than Greece, which is known as the source of Western civilization." Constantine was stunned. Nobel Prize, based in Greece, isn't this a cutoff from Sweden? Stroking him, looking at Nobel, who was in deep thought beside him, Constantine thought about it and felt that it was not impossible. After Crown Princess Sophie served as the president of the foundation, she was influenced by one of the executive members of the foundation, Iccius, the president of the University of Athens, and also took the great goal of reviving the center of Greek culture as one of her work goals. When Sophie heard the news that Nobel set up awards to reward those scientific workers, she became interested if the place where the awards are presented can be set in Greece. Think about it, every year those scientists and scholars who have won the awards will gather in Athens, Greece, when the awards are presented, which will be of great benefit to Greece's restoration of its cultural center status. Maybe some less respected scientists, Greece can also dig corners, hire them to work in Greek universities, and enrich the scientific faculty in Greece. www.uxiaspit.com. Yes, Mr. Nobel, if you agree, the award will be awarded. The location is in Greece, and our foundation will do our best to help you to get the award establishment and appraisal work on the right track as soon as possible. Constantine also took the opportunity to say although the Nobel family originally came from Sweden, the Nobel family originated in Russia, and most of the current family members live in Russia, and Nobel's own experience is more complicated. Nobel moved to Russia with his family when he was 9 years old, and traveled to the United States, Germany, Britain, France, and now Greece. I'm afraid I don't have any deep feelings for my hometown, therefore, it seems feasible to set the award in Greece. If you can agree, Mr. Nobel, the Royal Educational Foundation can contribute some of the funds and use it together with your wealth as a bonus. Sophie continued, looking at the thinking Nobel. Consider the suggestions of the two people. If the award is set up in Greece, there is no doubt that with the help of these two people, whether it is the work of lawyers, the publicity of the award, or even the legal permission, the progress will be very fast. There is no need to worry about political matters in this way. At the age of 63, with a serious decline in energy, I can really save my heart and effort. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 143, New Foundation. Despite these conveniences, setting up the Nobel Prize in Greece also has something to worry about. The first is the threat of war due to historical reasons. The Balkan Peninsula, where Greece is located, has mixed ethnic groups, religious chaos, and many contradictions. In the foreseeable future, this status quo will not change. This greatly increases the possibility of Greece falling into the threat of war. The second is the security of funds. A fortune of $9.2 million is an astronomical sum in this day and age. Money moves people's hearts, let alone such a huge sum of money. Greece's politics so far has never been a place of political clarity. Nobel's time is short. In order to maintain the award after Nobel's death, the foundation must be entrusted to manage this property. This requires the location of the award, preferably in a country where there is no competition and social stability. And does Greece have such social conditions? Taking into account these factors, Nobel did not immediately give a clear answer to Sophie's request to set the place of awarding the prize in Greece. He still needs to think for a while. His Royal Highness, what you said about hiring an experienced oil exploration team from Baku, I will greet the family. Nobel picked up the hat on the table and left the Tatoi Palace, ending today's meeting. After saying goodbye to this important guest, Sophie looked at Constantine and said, Constantine, why are you courting the Nobel Prize? Why win the Nobel Prize? Think about those later generations who regard the Nobel Prize as the highest award in science. Whenever a country's scientific level is measured, the Nobel Prize must be mentioned. There are many advantages to having such an award in Greece. Therefore, Constantine solemnly said to Crown Princess Sophie, it can be seen that Mr. Nobel respects you very much. Sophie, you have been visiting Nobel more recently, and you must ask Nobel to agree. If you can do it, to a certain extent, the goal of your foundation, the goal of restoring the centrality of Greek culture, will be achieved. The troubles his foundation encountered during the establishment of his foundation, you should serve more snacks and help. After all, Nobel has not been in Greece for a long time, and he is unfamiliar with his life. To win over Nobel? He wants to win more than Nobel, even the Nobel family behind Nobel. He also has ideas. The Nobel family has contributed a lot to Baku's ability to become a city of oil. If it can win over the Nobel family, Greece will be able to occupy a place in the coming wave of the oil revolution. With the help of Nobel, the Greek royal family hired an oil drilling team, carrying oil extraction equipment, to the city of Feri, 120 kilometers south of the important city of Tirana, now the capital of Albania, in Greece. With the help of the garrison, began to explore for oil in the local area. Since there is no accurate geographical location, Constantine only remembers that the Italians discovered oil fields here, but where is the city of Feri, Phuket Island? In Constantine's words, until the oil is found, the exploration team is responsible for man. Castrius was speechless for a moment. After arriving in Albania, they only stayed for a few weeks, and everyone complained. The poor Albania also opened their eyes. I thought that in Europe, the Russians were already poor, but Albania is even poorer than Russia. After nearly 3 months of hard work, even Castrius, the manager of the oil exploration team, was almost desperate, and finally drilled the first oil well. When the viscous black oil gushed out of the ground, the exploration team, in the countryside outside Feri, burst into tears of joy, finally getting out of this place where birds don't shit. Yakov was nervously sorting out his clothes. Although he was wearing the best clothes in the family, all the finances were looted when the family fled Poland. An old suit, which has faded, is still too disrespectful to meet such a noble person as Crown Prince Constantine. Instead, he thought that this visit to Crown Prince Constantine was a precious opportunity to change the family's bad status quo. When he learned from the newspapers that the royal family was looking for someone with rich financial experience, Yakov felt that his opportunity had come. Constantine, who was reading military documents in his office, said without looking up, "Come in, butler." Caped at a middle-aged man, Yakov, who was about 40 years old, and walked in. His Royal Highness, a gentleman came to apply for a job today, saying that he saw an advertisement of the royal family in the newspaper. Constantine rubbed his astringent eyes, stood up, and looked at the middle-aged man in front of him. brown hair, big nose, black eyes. This seems to be a Jew. After seeing Constantine getting up, Steward Caplet stood aside. Can you tell me your origin? Constantine said, looking at this special visitor. After Constantine received the news of the discovery of oil, he immediately prepared to set up a special foundation in Athens, and sent out recruitment information in the newspaper. Your Highness, my name is Yakov. I came from Poland before. Yakov took a deep breath and tried his best to calm down. Mr. Yakov, the newly established foundation of the royal family needs competent people to manage it. www.wuxiaspit.com. First of all, you must have rich experience in finance, business management, etc. You. Constantine asked Road, Sir, before coming to Athens from Poland, our family has been running a small bank in Warsaw, and has been in the banking industry for several generations, so you can trust my professional level, Yakov said nervously. Then, why did you come back to Athens? Constantine asked suspiciously, looking at Yakov's old suit. No matter how small the bank it is, and the financial practitioners are all gold-collar workers, it is impossible for them to not even have a formal dress. This. Yakov didn't say anything, with a look of embarrassment on his face. Is it because of your Jewish identity? After all, you are recruiting fund managers, so naturally you need to know the bottom line. Yes, there was another anti-Semitic movement in Warsaw before. A small family-run bank was looted. Because it couldn't repay its depositors on time, the bank was forced to declare bankruptcy. All the family's property was confiscated by the authorities, Yakov said nervously. At the end of the 19th century, a large number of Jews lived in Eastern Europe, and anti-Semitic movements continued to occur. The reason why Yakov felt uneasy when he heard Constantine say Jewish words was because he was afraid of the crown prince in front of him, who also discriminated against Jews. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 144, Oil and Nobility. Today, Yakov's family, after a nightmarish upheaval, has become refugees overnight from the upper classes of society through the old relationship. Yakov learned that the Greek economy is developing rapidly, and there are more job opportunities for those with skills. A family of 7, together with dozens of Jewish compatriots who were also looted, took a Greek merchant ship from the port of Odessa in Ukraine to Athens in order to make a living. Yakov had no choice but to work with his younger brother as a dock worker at the port. The family members who were frightened by the anti-Semitic movement did not support Yakov's risky job-seeking move, and believed that there was little hope of success in finding a job. Mr. Yakov, you don't have to be so nervous. You have read the job requirements in the newspaper. Do you have the confidence to do the foundation's work well? Constantine looked at Yakov, who was uneasy because his Jewish identity was exposed. Said, in fact, when the family was running the bank, they often came into contact with some Russian nobles. Poland was ruled by Russia at the time, to help them manage their property, make investments, etc. So you don't have to worry about my professional quality. See, Constantine not as concerned about his Jewish status as he feared. Yakov boldly recommended himself as long as he successfully seeks a position from His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and joins the line of the Greek royal family. The family, and even the compatriots who have been exiled here with him, may change the bad status quo. The newly established ZPO Foundation, the name of the new fund, is mainly engaged in investment, helping the royal family and the new nobles of Greece, managing assets, and ensuring the appreciation and preservation of assets. Constantine told Yakov, although the parliament agreed to the Greek royal family's move to entrust the nobles, it added a clause that the Greek nobles could not have any privileges, whether it was judicial or economic. Such a nobleman is completely an honorary title. Without any practical significance, such a cheap noble title will not have much incentive to the army, let alone the barrier royal family is for relying on the fiefs granted by the royal family to the nobles, to improve the economic situation of the nobles, and increase the influence of the nobles. It is even more difficult. First of all, Greece itself is not a country rich in arable land resources. How can there be a large area of arable land for the nobles? Moreover, the land in Greece is relatively barren, and the output per unit area is not high. What's more, it's the end of the 19th century, and the traditional aristocrats who live on land have long since declined. A noble with a unique vision has long since completed the transformation from aristocrat to capitalist, relying on renting land to tenants to get money. It's just a bad reputation. How much money can you make? Such aristocrats have absolutely no meaning for the royal family to divide the title with great fanfare, nor can they change the status quo of the Greek royal family's loneliness. After much deliberation, Constantine also came up with a solution. To give special value to the titles of Greek popular nobility set up a new type of foundation to engage in new industries with broad prospects. Just like in the traditional feudal division of nobles, the royal family gives the nobles a fief, and gives the new nobles a part of the foundation's income share. Through such a connection of interests, it will not only deepen the nobility and the royal family, it can also guide social funds to engage in emerging industries, and at the same time change the negative impression of most people on the aristocracy. In essence, this is the royal family taking money from their own pockets to buy the loyalty of the nobles. Moreover, in this purple robe foundation, in the constitution set by Constantine, only the nobles of Greece are eligible to hold shares in it. Of course, the key to doing this is that the industries that the foundation invests in not only have good prospects, but also generate huge profits every year. Otherwise, the incentive effect that the enfeoffed nobles should have will still not be achieved. Constantine greeted Yakov to sit down, and then explained the whole story to him. If you are really confident, you can start to organize and establish a foundation in the near future, Constantine demanded. After saying that, he took out a check from his desk, filled in 1,000 drachmas in the amount column, and handed it to him. Say to Yakov, settle down the family and arrange 2 formal outfits at the same time. After Yakov left the office, Constantine said to butler Capet, who was standing in the corner, have you heard what he said? For the sake of safety, you should send someone to check whether what he said is true, and ask the staff of the Greek embassy in Poland to inquire about the Yakov family in Warsaw. Although Yakov's experience is sympathetic, the Purple Robe Foundation was an important investment institution in Constantine's conception. Constantine could not just listen to Yakov's words and put it like this. The candidates for directors of important investment institutions have been determined. In July, the manager of the oil exploration team hired by Constantine, Castrius, made a long journey from the city of Feri in Albania to Athens in return for the Albanian oil field. Constantine, who heard the news, brought Yakov, the person in charge of the Purple Robe Foundation, to the hotel where Castrius was staying to meet Castrius. After getting off the carriage, under the guidance of the waiter, he entered the reserved reception room. A sturdy, bronze-skinned, inch-headed man slumped lazily in the sofa. Seeing the two come in, Castrius stood up and said respectfully, Your Highness, this is the manager of the Zipeo Foundation, Yakov, and the Zipeo Foundation will be the main investor in the oil field. Constantine introduced to Castrius what other industry has more investment prospects, more lucrative returns, and more incentives for the aristocracy than the oil industry. Tell us about the specific situation of the oil fields in Albania. After the 3 of them were seated, Constantine said, most of the oil fields near the city of Feri in Albania are heavy oil and super heavy oil. With the current technology, it is impossible to exploit it at all, Castrius said regretfully. At present, the exploration team has made 3 attempts. Only 2 oil wells can be exploited at www.uucanchu.com. The oil quality is good, but it is also limited. The extracted crude oil contains high sulfur content, and the cost of smelting is high. Constantine's heart sank, saying that, I was very happy. Based on your experience, are the oil fields in Albania worth much exploitation? If more investment is made, how much can the annual output be? Constantine asked disappointedly. Because most of the oil is heavy oil and cannot be extracted, there are not many places that meet the conditions for extraction. In my opinion, the annual output is 70,000 to 80,000 tons. Of course, with the improvement of oil technology, the annual production may increase a little, Castrius lamented. It turned out to be only 70 or 80,000 tons. Really? 70 or 80,000 tons? Constantine said in surprise. 70,000 to 80,000 tons less. Greece has a population of just over 2 million, and the crude oil output of 70,000 to 80,000 tons is about a few hundred kilograms per person, which is already quite a lot. But think about it, Castrius comes from the oil city of Baku in the Caucasus. Compared with the oil fields in Baku, the Albanian oil fields with an annual output of 70,000 to 80,000 tons are indeed not very productive. Constantine, who turned from joy to worry, said, the annual output of 70,000 to 80,000 tons may increase with the advancement of technology? Enough is enough, Constantine. Did it have any extravagant hopes? Greece, like some big dog owners, sold oil to get rich. Chapter 145, the turmoil caused by the Olympics. The newly established Purple Robe Foundation has received an investment of 20 million drachmas from the royal family. The head of the Purple Robe Foundation, Yakov, was asked by Constantine to keep in touch with the exploration team managed by Castrius for Constantine. There are still some urgent problems that need to be solved before Greece can continue to use oil on a large scale to promote rapid economic development. When Coubertin visited King George, the king agreed to Coubertin's proposal to host the first modern Olympic Games in Athens in 1896. After receiving the king's approval, Coubertin, full of confidence, believed that the restoration of the Olympia Games in ancient Greece was about to succeed. So he decided to personally visit the Greek Prime Minister, Alexandros, to finalize the specific details. The news that Greece will restore its ancient traditions and hold the first modern Olympic Games spread like wildfire, which has received strong support from the citizens of Athens. On July 4, Coubertin came to the Prime Minister's residence of Alexandros to discuss the practical issues of hosting the Olympic Games. Mr. Prime Minister, the resumption of the first modern Olympia Games in Greece is of great historical significance. What do you think of this matter? Coubertin looked at Alexandros and asked impatiently. You're right, Mr. Coubertin, Alexandros responded absent-mindedly. Seeing the indifferent Prime Minister, Coubertin's original excited mood was like pouring cold water on him. Prime Minister Alexandros, is there any difficulty for you? Coubertin wondered why Alexandros was not in high spirits. You must know that in Greece, the birthplace of the Olympia Games, the restoration of a 1,000-year-long interruption tradition not only has positive significance for world sports, but also a good opportunity for Greece to inspire people and enhance national self-confidence. This is equivalent to giving Greece a chance to show itself in front of the world. Mr. Coubertin, I am very aware of the importance of hosting the Olympic Games in Greece. However, the Greek government has its own difficulties, Alexandros said with a wry smile. Now the treasury of Greece is empty, and there is simply not enough money to hold such a grand event. Coubertin was stunned, thinking about King George's sworn promise, and then looking at the prevarication of the Prime Minister in front of him. He said unwillingly, to hold the games, only 2 million francs are enough. Mr. Coubertin, according to the current enthusiasm of the Greek people, although I have not held a sports meeting, I also know that 2 million drachmas are far from enough to deal with this sports meeting. At least 6 million is needed. Alexandros shook his head helplessly. The Greek government has just endured a war, and all of a sudden, Greece really can't come up with money. Watching Coubertin leave in despair, Alexandros was also depressed. When he first assumed the post of Prime Minister, Alexandros was very ambitious. He was lucky. Greece had just defeated the Ottomans. With a stepping stone of the Ottomans, Greece's prestige in Europe had also reached the level of a second-rate country. Just taking advantage of this opportunity, I worked hard to make Greece's national strength reach a new level. When he left office later, he became the Prime Minister praised by the Greek people. However, after 3 months in office, with a deepening of the end of the contact, Alexandros slowly recollected that Greece's finances were in jeopardy, and it might go bankrupt at any time. In less than 3 months of war, the Greek army fought majestically on the battlefield and quickly resolved the war. Despite this, the expenditure of hundreds of thousands of troops completely exhausted the last drop of blood in the Greek treasury. Coupled with the failure to get Ottomans reparations, the already heavily indebted Greek government made it even worse. 2 months ago, in order to ease the financial pressure, the government had already borrowed 50 million drachmas from the 3 major domestic banks. Few are left. Originally, according to Alexandros' plan, as long as the Greek government saves a little in the past few months, I will rack my brains, think of ideas, and embezzle some funds to survive the current difficult time and wait until the next year's tax payment in Greece. After the account, even if it is paid in the past. However, Coubertin, who suddenly appeared, proposed that Greece host the Olympic Games and broke his plan. The Prime Minister's secretary, Rufus, stepped forward and said, Prime Minister, I also saw a report in the newspaper today that Greece is going to host the Olympia Games. As far as I know, the people are very enthusiastic about this matter. I'm afraid that your answer will arouse criticism from everyone, Rufus said worriedly. The government is now heavily in debt, and, in 2 months, there is a loan from the United Kingdom that expires. It is really out of time to spend a lot of money to hold the Olympia Games. Alexandros took off his glasses and rubbed his temples. Helpless said, let's find a way to deal with the current predicament. However, the development of things is beyond Alexandros' imagination. As news of Prime Minister Alexandros' refusal to hold the games spread, Greek newspapers began lashing out at the government's short-sightedness. At the same time, the opposition in the parliament also began to criticize, and the people were even more dissatisfied for a time. Alexandros was under tremendous pressure as someone who has been in the political arena for decades. Alexandros is keenly aware of the difference. Even if the Greek government's actions disappoint the people, it should not cause such a big reaction, especially the unusual behavior of Crown Prince Constantine in public. Constantine criticized the Greek government for being inefficient and short-sighted on July 6. In desperation, Alexandros, who is under great pressure, had to give a speech in the parliament, telling everyone that even if the Greek finances did not host the Olympic Games, there was a possibility of bankruptcy at the same time. He appealed to the public to be patient for the time being, and to wait until next year when the financial tension eased before discussing the Olympics. Originally thought that at this point, the turmoil caused by the Olympic Games should end the next day, under the pretext of not being able to hold the Olympic Games. www.wuxiaspit.com. The Greek newspapers changed their tune and began to criticize the Greek government for its incompetence and confusion. Can't come up with a sum of money for an emergency. The Greek newspapers, big and small, are surprisingly unanimous. The tax system. The report pointed out that the true meaning of taxation is to pluck the most goose feathers and listen to the least goose chirping. However, the Greek government really caught the poor and plucked them hard, causing the poor people to mourn everywhere and the rich do turn a deaf ear. The poor and the rich pay the same amount in taxes, no matter how big their personal income gap is. It is Greece's unfair tax system that has caused the country's sluggish income to fall into such a dilemma. After the victory of the war, Greece's international status skyrocketed, and the people's morale also improved. Now I see that the government cannot even provide money for such an important event as the Olympics. This strong contrast is unbearable for the people. In particular, a large number of articles in the newspapers accusing the shortcomings of the current tax system have touched the pain points of the general public and have aroused widespread resonance. For a while, there were endless criticisms of the Greek government. At the same time, it calls for reform of the tax system. At this time, Alexandros also woke up. It was obvious that someone was taking the opportunity to make trouble. This turmoil can no longer be easily resolved. Chapter 146, Special Period. The next day, Prime Minister Alexandros hurried to the royal palace on Syntagma Square to meet King George in the council room. Seeing that the king and the crown prince were discussing matters, the Prime Minister did not care about anything else and said directly to King George, "Your Majesty, the public opinion in Greece these 2 days is almost all criticizing the government. If left unchecked, it may lead to unrest. I implore your majesty to grant the government the right to temporarily censor the news to calm the situation." King George seemed not at all surprised by the prime minister's words, instructing him to sit down. "Prime Minister, when I went to the port of Piraeus to inspect the day before yesterday, I met a family, dragging their family with them, carrying their luggage on their backs, and obviously they were going to emigrate." King George pressed the prime minister's question not to list. Instead, he started telling a story. As a king, it is natural to feel humiliated when encountering subjects emigrated to other countries. I went up and asked them where they were going and why. King George talked eloquently. Although he was anxious, Alexandros could only be patient at this time. Hearing that it was an immigrant, Alexandros disapproved. At the end of the 19th century, people from Greece immigrated to North America every year, ranging from tens of thousands to thousands. At this time, North America was vast and sparsely populated, with rapid industrial development and a large shortage of labor. Therefore, it is not surprising that the Greeks immigrated to North America. King George continued, "They told me that they wanted to go to relatives in Smyrna, on the coast of the Aegean Sea in Asia Minor. The taxes in Greece were too high, and they were busy all year round, just to be able to eat." Alexandros widened his eyes with a wonderful expression. He faltered and said, "Here, maybe they have wealthy relatives, in Ottoman's place." King George, as if he had never heard of it, continued, "Didn't Ottoman be defeated by us? Why did the Greeks go to Asia Minor instead?" Due to the high foreign debt of the government, and the previous government in response to the war, Prime Minister Ptolemy raised taxes several times. Although the war is over now, the government's finances are still tight, and the temporary increase in taxes during the war has not been abolished. Moreover, the foreign debts of the Greek government, until now, have always been repaid with interest due every year, and the principal has not been repaid at all. The current tax system in Greece is also an equal tax system. Everyone pays the same amount of tax regardless of income gap. Therefore, although the Trikoupis government seems to increase taxes only a little each time, for the people of the middle and lower classes, every increase makes them feel unbearable because under this tax system, People with different incomes have different tax-bearing capacity for those who are rich. Such a tax increase is not worth mentioning. The two are in stark contrast. People with higher incomes feel the taxes in Greece are low. On the other hand, the poor with low income feel that the taxation in Greece is very high. Such unfair taxation has resulted in a weak tax collection capacity in Greece. Frankly speaking, Prime Minister, do you think Greece should not change? Constantine interjected. The army also has grievances against the government now. Originally speaking, in peacetime, the Greek army was increased by 10,000 people, and the strength of a standing division was established. As a result, the meeting was over, and there is no shadow of appropriation until now. 2 days ago, the chief of the general staff was full of anger, and hurriedly came to Constantine, saying that the pension fee for the Greek soldiers was clearly stipulated, but now the payment has shrunk, causing the soldiers of the army to blame the officer. Greece did win the war, but do you have to digest these newly acquired territories? Constantine said this, but he was also angry. Albania is still under military control. If the Greek government does not take measures to bring Albania under the control of the Greek government, when will you wait? Originally, last time the government deliberately held a meeting on Albania's affairs, but after that, nothing happened. Do you have to wait until the Italians have recovered from the political chaos of the defeat of the war and have time to meddle in Albanian affairs? Without money, the government can't do anything. Constantine's complaint made Alexandros look embarrassed. Your Highness, there is nothing you can do. You know the financial situation of Greece. I know that the government has no money. If the current situation continues, if no changes are made, there will be no money in the future. Alexandros saw that Crown Prince Constantine was targeting the tax system, and he said with bitterness in his heart, the reason why the government adopts a tax-sharing system is that it is easy to operate and everyone pays the same tax. Originally, thought that the Prime Minister's post was a sweet pastry, but now it seems that it has become a hot potato. King George has been deeply touched since he encountered the immigration incident. The Greeks' own kingdom was not welcomed by the Greeks, and after discussing with others, they also intended to reform. Alexandros was in the conference room, walking back and forth anxiously, thinking about the opinions of the king and the crown prince. The next day, Greek Prime Minister Alexandros delivered a speech to lawmakers at the National Assembly building, demanding tax reforms and higher taxes for high-income earners in response to the financial crisis. The Prime Minister, who is under tremendous pressure in all aspects, had no choice but to test the reaction of the parliament and the people. A stone stirred up 1,000 waves. Obviously, by doing this, the interests of high-income earners have been lost, and naturally they have to fight back. www.uxiaspit.com. The next day, the Athens newspaper also changed its tone and began to criticize government officials, corruption, inefficiency, social services difference. At the same time, he began to accuse Greece of the party system, which divides the party and does not care about Greece's national interests at all, especially when Trikoupis was the prime minister, because Greece borrowed a lot of debt for infrastructure construction. The contractors followed behind the officials, bribing officials, giving kickbacks, and collusion between officials and businessmen to get the project. Officials and businessmen prospered, while the Greek government was heavily in debt. The unrest caused by the hosting of the Olympic Games intensified on the morning of July 8. Constantine himself sat in the Defense Ministry building in Athens. Okay, everyone, Greece is now in a special period. From now on, there is no order from the general staff. Any Greek army must not be moved at will. Violators will be punished with treason. Constantine said with a serious face to the army. The officers of the general staff announced. Almost all the senior members of the Greek army were present. Your Highness, is this too much of a fuss? Manougianaski asked suspiciously, making a fuss? Do you know how many wars have been caused by conflicts over taxation in history? Constantine said angrily, especially the first division of your army, which is stationed on the outskirts of Athens. You must be careful not to make mistakes at this time. Chapter 147, Reform. On July 5, Constantine personally visited the Prime Minister's residence in order to persuade Alexandros. Now, all the contradictions in society have been intensified, Constantine said, looking at the dignified Prime Minister. The situation is now clear that the Greek government must reform. In the previous war, if it wasn't for the help of the Congo, relying solely on the strength of Greece to defeat the Ottoman Empire was simply wishful thinking. Holding the fate of the country and taking military adventures without confidence. This feeling is an unforgettable suffering for the military chief. Therefore, after the war, Constantine had ideas for reform. Your Highness, Isn't this public opinion turmoil secretly directed by the royal family? Alexandros tentatively asked. This unrest broke out without warning and suddenly became known to people, not necessarily a political conspiracy. Is it any good for the royal family to do this? Constantine explained. Constantine himself was aware of this crisis. King George did not authorize the prime minister's right to censor the press. He also sensed the widespread dissatisfaction in society and did not dare to take drastic actions again, causing large-scale chaos. Besides, the royal family doesn't have that much energy to mobilize all the newspapers to create public opinion, could it be that the bourgeoisie dominates public opinion? Alexandros guessed if it is the bourgeoisie, according to their energy, they can really achieve the current situation in recent years. With the development of commerce and trade in Greece, the strength of the Greek bourgeoisie has grown rapidly. These people are dissatisfied with the government for a long time. In order to solve the financial crisis, the government naturally has to start with middle and high-income earners. For those middle and lower-class people in Greece, the government can't scrape any oil. In any case, it is only natural that the Greek bourgeoisie would act. It's more likely that everyone is dissatisfied. Constantine analyzed. The reason for the army's dissatisfaction is very clear. The middle and lower classes are dissatisfied. The reason is very simple, and the pressure of paying taxes is too great. The lower middle class accounts for most of the Greek government's tax revenue. Factory owners, bankers, and other middle and high-income earners naturally want to express themselves politically as their economic power increases, especially the factory owners and bankers. Actually, you are very clear in your heart, don't you? Alexandros was expressionless, but he knew in his heart what Constantine was talking about. In the current Greek government, the party's fat distribution system is popular. During the election, in order to win everyone's contribution, the high-level officials of each party wantonly divide officials and promise benefits. After the election was successful, the prime minister placed his cronies around him in various positions in the government with a swipe of his pen. Under this system, officials have no professional quality at all. They don't understand government affairs at first, and after successful speculation, they naturally don't know anything about official affairs. Moreover, due to the limited term of office of the prime minister, these officials who have finally taken office are naturally hurrying to make money every once in a while. Due to the change of the prime minister, the government's public offices from top to bottom have to be replaced. Not only is the government paralyzed, the hungry wolves have left, and a group of hungry wolves have come, and the cycle is endless. Civil servants have high salaries, few things to do, long holidays, and occasional extra gray income. Who doesn't like this kind of work? If you want to get public office, no matter how big or small, you must join a political party, otherwise you will have no chance. For example, the police chief of Athens, according to common sense, should be an experienced person. In fact, in such an important position, every time a new prime minister takes office, he has to replace his confidantes for his professional ability. It doesn't matter whether he meets the requirements of the police chief. What matters is that he is loyal to himself and his party, so much so that the police in Athens now are all flatterers and have no ability to handle criminal cases, which makes people criticize. This kind of fertilizer distribution system has led to rampant corruption and malaise in the government. The so-called safeguarding of national interests is simply out of the question, not to mention that the society is dissatisfied with the government. Even the army is quite complaining. When Trikoupis was prime minister, because of his outstanding political achievements and deep prestige, he served for a long time, and there was an endless stream of job seekers following his ass at present. Almost all the staff in the Greek government are appointed by Trikoupis. Alexandros himself also received the political legacy of Trikoupis. In order to successfully serve as prime minister, those public officials appointed by Trikoupis, for the sake of the stability of their positions, naturally supported him. Hey, I also understand the shortcomings of the government, but this is not urgent and can be changed, Alexandros said embarrassedly. Although he called for reform in parliament, it was only a temptation. Everyone worked together to push him to the throne of prime minister, and now, if he seeks reform, won't he break with them? If he carries out drastic reforms and touches everyone's interests, his political life will end very quickly. Now things have come to this point, it is up to you to choose, Constantine admonished. If you hesitate and fail to make up your mind, according to the current situation, His Majesty may forcibly dismiss you as prime minister, Constantine threatened. What? Alexandros asked in surprise. For a long time, King George did not interfere in government affairs unless necessary for the current reform requirements. King George's attitude will be so tough. Alexandros thought carefully. Now he has only two options. First, openly break with the partisans he cultivated when Trikoupis was in office. and actively reform to eliminate the evils even if she is lucky enough to succeed. It will affect her political life. The second is to resign decisively. Leave this mess to someone else to solve. Protect yourself, and hope for another day. Looking at the hesitant Alexandros, Constantine continued, although this is a crisis, it is also an opportunity. If you can successfully reform, even if your term is short, you will be an effective Greek prime minister. And www.uxiaspit.com. You will have the full support of the army and the royal family. Constantine's last words were like a blockbuster. Alexandros shot a pair of sharp eyes, stared at Constantine and said, "Your Highness, is this true? In fact, there is no doubt about whether the government should reform or not. Even the reform target has a ready-made imitation, the British civil service." Alexandros' hesitation was not all about worrying about his political life. What he really worries about is the so-called reform, which is just a temptation. If the turmoil caused is too great, the government will not come to power, and use him as a scapegoat to calm the public anger. Those who are dissatisfied with the status quo and demand reform, and those whose interests are damaged in the reform. If the reform fails, it will only cause fire. It doesn't matter if it is despicable or not. At that point, this is the best choice. Alexandros can become the prime minister. Of course, not a political rookie. Good intentions do not mean that things can be done, and now, the army fully supports the reform. And this heavy weight makes the balance in his heart tilt quickly. This means that the royal family has really made up their minds not to hesitate to use its prestige in the army to forcibly reform. Chapter 148. Consultation. On July 8, after receiving the personal commitment of Constantine, Alexandros finally chose to agree to the reform and made a statement in the parliament that afternoon. The reform mainly includes three aspects. First, similar to the British civil service system, establish a system of affairs officers and administrative officers, and at the same time establish a retirement system for officials. Second, reform the tax system and abolish the original equal taxation. Third, strengthen the independence of the judicial system. It seems to be just three simple points, but in fact it is an earth-shaking change to the current system. After the Prime Minister's statement, the emotionally charged MPs yelled at Alexandros shameless, traitor, and the scene almost got out of control. Of course, among the 300 members of Congress, there are many who have long been dissatisfied with the status quo and enthusiastically support Alexandros. Those members of parliament who serve in the government are naturally strongly opposed. The two sides with strongly opposing views took action on the spot on the parliament. There are even congressmen who want to vote immediately to depose Alexandros as prime minister. King George, with the prerogative of the king, forcibly rejected the resolution of the parliament and stood for the prime minister. The next morning, government officials whose interests were damaged directly launched a strike, threatening to paralyze the government, and strongly opposed reforms, especially Article 1, the establishment of a British-style civil service system. The peasants, workers, citizens, and factory owners who had long been dissatisfied with the government's taxation system also organized a parade to support Prime Minister Alexandros' reform and purge the government. A large number of the two sides gathered on the Constitution Square and confronted each other with a vicious attitude in view of the chaotic situation in Athens. In order to avoid further deterioration of the situation, with the assistance of Constantine, King George ordered the 1st Division to enter the city to maintain order. On July 10, the protagonist of the reform, Prime Minister Alexandros, was assassinated by a man in black when he was inspecting from the Prime Minister's residence. Fortunately, after Constantine contacted Alexandros, he dispatched a class of the royal guards, soldiers proficient in work, to the Prime Minister. When the assassination occurred, the guards responded quickly and killed the assassin. Quickly, the assassin's pistol only scratched the Prime Minister's arm, but luckily it was fine. Syntagma Square, Royal Palace. King George and Constantine stood by the window, observing the dark crowd on the square downstairs. Although it has been expected, there is still such a big disturbance. King George sighed helplessly. Change is inherently painful, and there is no way to do it, Constantine said with relief. After all, the king is no longer young, and he feels a little powerless against this chaotic situation. How are the preparations for the consultation meeting? Let's end it as soon as possible. It's a mess. After King George turned to leave, he asked Constantine, who was following him, since the situation is too chaotic, in order for everyone to reach an agreement as soon as possible, the royal family will act as a mediator and try their best to bring all parties together to reach a unity. I've asked Cape Butler to do it. In the conference hall, there is a square table covered with a white tablecloth, and the exquisite porcelain plate holds the full-grained grapes, the orange-yellow citrus, and the delicate roses inserted in several vases. which are pleasing to the eye at both ends of the square table. King George and the Prime Minister are seated respectively between the two. More than 40 people, representatives of each faction, sat upright after seeing everyone gathered. King George nodded to Constantine, who was standing behind him. Everyone, the purpose of calling everyone here is very clear, in order to discuss the specific terms of the reform of the Greek government. Constantine stepped forward, stood beside the kingdom of George, and said to everyone, "This crisis, on the surface, is caused by the Olympic Games, but in essence it is the Greek financial system, which is no longer in line with the current social situation. Greece will have a British loan due next month. Before that, if you don't want the Greek government to declare bankruptcy, you must solve the financial problem. In a distorted social system, no one will be the real winner, not even the winner under the current system." Having said that, Constantine looked at everyone, observing everyone's reactions. First of all, the appointment system of officials must be reformed. There is no room for maneuver. After Prime Minister Alexandros made up his mind, his attitude was extremely firm. Speaking of which, after the news of the Prime Minister's injury spread, the public opinion in Greece supported him almost overwhelmingly, but it allowed Alexandros to establish an image of an active reforming politician in front of the public. Alexandros' support for reform is also due to the fact that the time is ripe. The Greek bourgeoisie, along with the industrialization of Greece, has gradually grown in strength. In carrying out reforms, the broad bourgeoisie supports it. It was the power of the bourgeoisie that allowed Alexandros to see the possibility of countering the entrenched bureaucracy in Greek society. It is almost unanimous for everyone to reform the appointment system of officials, except for the current officials. Now, Western European countries have followed a British civil service system and carried out reforms. As a representative of the bourgeoisie, Goldberry was also invited to attend. Greece should also follow up and learn from the advanced systems of Western Europe. Obviously, he supports the reform of the civil service system except for the official representatives. Almost everyone nodded in support. Your Majesty, Prime Minister, I personally know the drawbacks of the party's fattening system. As an official representative, Delianis had to make a statement even though she was alone, but this system cannot be completely changed in a day or two. The civil servants in the government now stay in the government almost all the year round. They have become accustomed to relaxed and leisurely work, and suddenly a comprehensive reform of the civil service system is carried out. www.uxiaspit.com. It is unacceptable to everyone. If the government's reform measures are too drastic and rapid, there will be strong resistance from officials. Darines threatened vaguely. There was nothing else to do for Andrines. The Greek society had almost reached a consensus on the reform of the appointment system for officials. From the king to the people, everyone was unwilling to continue to support such officials as for their threat. The officials all went on strike and paralyzed the government. I think so. This official appointment system must be changed, but it is not in a hurry. It is better to do it slowly like the British. Constantine interjected. As for the official appointment system, the government can make a long-term plan and make continuous efforts in this direction. Constantine suggested there is no way, and it is impossible to remove all the current officials in Greece overnight, and it is impossible to find so many people to replace them. It can only be reformed gradually. The general strike of all officials is not to be underestimated, and it is very likely to cause disorder in the social order. Step by step is indeed appropriate, but how can we be sure that this reform can be implemented? Kosterblum worried. After the crisis is resolved, who can guarantee that the government will not germinate? Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 149, Debate. After deliberation, a civil service system reform management committee can be formed, directly under His Majesty's orders, and responsible for coordinating and supervising the implementation of the official appointment system. Prime Minister Alexandros responded to Kostebro's questioning. 4. Greece. It is different from the past. The bourgeois upstarts like you are rich and powerful, and many members of the parliament have been in contact with you for a long time. After the current crisis, the members of the parliament who represent the interests of the bourgeoisie have increased power. After the prime minister announced the reform, although most of the members were opposed to it, it is worth noting that there are also a small number of members who supported the prime minister's reform. In addition to the justice-minded MPs who really dislike the official gang, there are also dozens of MPs who are closely related to the interests of the bourgeoisie, and even invest in business in Greece themselves. so they support the Prime Minister's reform. This in itself proves the growing power of the bourgeoisie in Greek society. The reform of the official appointment system is indeed imminent. However, if officials leave office, or after retirement, their lives are still not guaranteed. I think, no matter how reforms are made, officials' unscrupulous corruption will still not be able to be stopped. The reason why officials accept bribes when they hold official positions is not only because of greed, but the country does not have a corresponding system to help officials deal with retirement and life after leaving office. This fear of life in the future drives public officials to seize the time to grab money when they are in office, and the more frequent the rotation of political parties, the more rampant this ethos is, because the frequent change of political parties means that their time in office is limited. To be honest, I have also seen colleagues who are not used to officials or parliamentarians, who go down, and obtain illegal benefits, perform their duties when they are in office, and quickly get into trouble after leaving office. These honest public servants, or parliamentarians, have become negative teaching materials. Because of them, other public servants will be more afraid of the day they lose their power, and they will try their best to make money while they are in office. Representatives, for the interests of the public servants, are also fighting for it. Everyone whispered to each other left and right, and the chamber was buzzing. After a while, it was quiet again, and everyone looked at the Prime Minister, hoping that he could provide a solution to the problem that Teresa had responded to. It is true that public servants have served in the government for a long time and lost their livelihood security after losing public office, the Prime Minister said confidently. So, in the reform of the official appointment system, we must also establish a retired official system, so that they have no worries. After that, he looked at everyone's reaction, especially Delia's attitude. For Andreans, reform is imperative, and as a representative, he has also won enough benefits for the current public officials. Judging from the measures of the Prime Minister's reform, the initial reform of the official appointment system will be moderate. Seeing that there was no objection from everyone, Alexandros continued, then, the next discussion is about the tax system, and everyone can speak freely. I think the current tax system is actually very fair. All Greek citizens pay the same tax, said Silos, the tailor shop owner. What's a fair tax system? No more. Silos opened a tailor shop in the city of Athens, and the royal family was also his client, earning a lot of money under the current equal amount tax system. The tax he pays is almost negligible. He who earns 20,000 to 30,000 drachma a month and the public who earn 200 drachma a month pay the same tax. No matter how the tax system is changed, the tax he has to pay will increase substantially, and he is naturally unwilling to change the current tax system. Yes, in fact, the current tax system is quite reasonable. Citizens of the Kingdom of Greece, each paying the same tax, is not fair. Several people present agreed. The representatives of the small shopkeepers, handicraftsmen, and small workshop shopkeepers present, including Koster Bloom, the default successor of Alpha Bank, the general manager of the Greek Angolese head office, such absolute high income earners, representatives of the bourgeoisie, also nodded and said yes. Originally, Koster Bloom wanted to make some remarks to prove that such a taxation system was indeed fair, but when he looked up and saw the half-smiling Constantine standing behind the king, he probably felt a little shameless himself. Saying that, he closed his mouth angrily. It's pure sophistry, Delianus said angrily. Some Greeks, just born, have wealth that others can't match in their entire lives. The income disparity is so disparate, but they pay the same tax. How is it fair? As representatives of public officials, the reform of the tax system has allowed Greece to receive more taxes, and officials absolutely support it. After all, the more revenue the government earns, the more oil and water they get as public servants. In the final analysis, all the government's expenses must pass through their hands. Now it is the official representatives' turn to support it, and the others to oppose it. Sometimes, the reason why there are so many disputes in human society is because everyone has different positions and different perspectives. The same question may have completely opposite answers. Many social problems, unlike 1 + 1 = 2, the answers are intuitive and irrefutable. In any case, Greece is facing a debt crisis, and the current equal taxation system can no longer keep up with the development of the country. Alexandros said, to be fair, it's better to pay different taxes according to personal wealth. Delians continued, in order to expand the government's finances and adjust the wealth gap between the citizens, I suggest that a progressive taxation method should be used. Progressive Taxation www.uxiaspit.com means that different tax rates are determined according to the level of income. High-income earners are taxed at high tax rates, and low-income earners are taxed at low tax rates. As soon as Delia's progressive system exited, there was an uproar in the council room. No, it's too unfair to be progressive. Silos had a strong attitude. This is to combat hard work and reward laziness. For the country, although the fiscal increase will be obvious for a while, it will be harmful to the country in the long run, because this system will hit the capable people and their income. The taller the person, the more at a loss. Gauberry objected. The proportional system should be used to pay taxes. No matter how much income, everyone pays taxes in a uniform proportion. In this way, people with high incomes pay higher taxes, and people with lower incomes pay lower taxes, which not only increases fiscal revenue, and there is no drawback of progressive taxation. Silos was emotional, and the two powers harmed the lesser. Although he adopted the proportional taxation system, the tax he should pay would increase several times, which is still much less than the progressive taxation. The current situation is also very obvious. If the government's tax revenue cannot be increased, it will go bankrupt. However, the tax system starts from equal taxation to progressive taxation at one time. The span is too large, and it is easy to mess with that, which is not advisable. In this case, it is better to use the proportional system for taxation of personal income. Prime Minister Alexandros concluded. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website, Chapter 150, Reach an Opinion. Using the proportional system to pay taxes, the poor in the middle and lower classes are relieved from the heavy burden of paying most of the taxes. The government has increased financial resources, and the financial crisis can be solved. The only ones whose interests are damaged are the middle and high income earners in the society. However, they will be compensated in Article 3 reforms. Then, let's talk about the third goal of reform, strengthening the independence of the judicial system. Prime Minister Alexandros announced to everyone, as long as the independence of the judiciary can be strengthened, even if I pay more taxes, I am willing. Silos said. First, every time a dispute occurs, the court does not make a judgment based on the law, but instead seeks a relationship with everyone. Officials can easily influence the work of the courts. Most of the people present nodded in agreement with Silos' opinion. Actually, the chaos of the Greek judicial system is also influenced by the civil service system and the parties' fat-sharing system. The judges of the court must have a good relationship with a political party before they can take office. How can such a court be fair? Kantouritis, the current Greek textile tycoon, as the factory owner's representative, was also invited this time to participate in the reform consultations. The judicial system is not independent. Whenever there is an economic dispute, the court always fails to make a fair and just judgment. For businessmen, it is easy to suffer losses. For many businessmen, the opaque laws will greatly discourage everyone's investment enthusiasm. It's easy to fall into a vicious circle when litigating. In order to make the verdict in your favor, everyone scrambles to bribe the judge. Sometimes when I meet someone with a deep background, I can only admit that I am unlucky. The judges can't do anything either. Their salaries are in the hands of others. There is little opposition to reforms to increase judicial independence, especially the representatives of the bourgeoisie. They support reform because they are fed up with the suffering of the judicial system. The reform measures of the judicial system, in order to strengthen the independence of the judiciary and let the law serve everyone fairly and justly in social life, the future operation funds of the courts must first be listed separately in the budget, rather than being trapped in the executive department, said Prime Minister Alexandros. Similarly, in the future, the Greek court system will operate as independently as possible, without the influence of administrative agencies, social groups, and individuals. In fact, the three goals of the reform are all related. For example, in tax reform, if there is no clean and efficient tax collection agency, choosing a proportional tax system that is difficult to operate will do more harm than good. It is better to choose an equal tax system because its operation is simple. How much tax has been paid, and how much has not been paid? Count the number of people and the total amount, and you will know. Anyway, everyone pays the same amount of tax. The confusion in the judiciary was also influenced by the official appointment and dismissal system. As a result, the political crisis originally triggered by the financial crisis has led to a comprehensive reform of the current government. Seeing that everyone was in favor of judicial reform, and that this reform consultation was approved by everyone, Constantine was also relieved in general. All classes have something to offer. Civil service groups will be restricted and will gradually follow the British civil service system to reform. As compensation, they will have a retirement system the lower middle class poor benefit the most. They don't have to feel the burden of not being able to breathe because they haven't heard the news of the tax increase as before, because the taxation system has been changed to a proportional taxation system. Relatively speaking, the emerging bourgeoisie will become an important source of tax payment in the future, but they will also be compensated. The right to speak in society will be strengthened, the judicial system will be reformed, and their business costs will be reduced in the future. The reform proposals are full of compromises with the efforts of all parties. The government reluctantly reached a consensus with representatives from all walks of life after more than 40 delegates left. King George, Constantine, and Prime Minister Alexandros, the three of them could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. The crisis was finally over. On the way to see the Prime Minister back to his official residence, Prime Minister Alexandros gratefully said to Constantine, "Your Highness, thank you for your support. This crisis seems to be easy to resolve." It was resolved after calling representatives from all walks of life to discuss it. In fact, it is very risky for the royal family to do so, especially the act of decisively mobilizing the army and forcibly maintaining order in case everyone's differences are sharp, and a consensus cannot be reached for a long time. The whole country may fall into civil war and chaos, and even the royal family will be caught in flames. From the perspective of the royal family, a more secure way to deal with it should be to not intervene in disputes in the government. After all, Greece is a constitutional monarchy, and the king is not obliged to take charge of the government's financial problems. It is the parliament's problem. If the government of Alexandros can solve the financial crisis, everyone will be happy. If he can't handle the matter effectively, he should also throw his hands on the parliament and let them re-elect a new prime minister who can take on a big job until all parties are exhausted and finally compromise with each other and reach a consensus. You don't have to, Prime Minister. The royal family has their own considerations, Constantine said in a relaxed tone. The region of Albania, which Greece is currently ceding from the Ottomans, is still under military control due to lack of government funding. The lack of government finances has affected normal work. In addition to these considerations, the reason why Constantine decisively persuaded King George to use the army as the prime minister's platform to promote reform was also because the Greek society itself had indeed accumulated a lot of contradictions. After years of rapid economic development in Greece, the traditional and imported means of economic development have come to an end. For example, in the development of the textile industry in Greece, almost all the main machines are imported from Germany. It is said to develop the industry. In fact, it is more accurate to say that it is processing with supplied materials, and raw cotton is imported from abroad. After processing by the same imported German machines, the textile becomes cloth, exported to the Ottoman Empire. There is also the export of agricultural products from the Congo, such as coffee and sugar, to countries on the Mediterranean and Black Sea coasts, relying on trade to make money. However, in the next time, if Greece still relies on these old means, it will be very difficult for Greece to continue its rapid economic development. Further development of the Greek economy. Reading www.ucanchu.com can no longer rely on pure export trade. He needs some spare money in the hands of the Greek people to consume and promote the transformation and upgrading of Greece's economic structure. This requires changes to Greece's original equal taxation system. Constantine did not want Greece, because of the internal chaos, a good opportunity for the development of measures after the signing of the London Treaty with the Ottoman Empire. This large market once again opened its doors to Greek goods, which is a good time for the development of Greek industry. It would be extremely unfavorable for Greece to wait for a large amount of German industrial products to enter the Ottoman Empire. With the warming of relations between the two countries, if a country cannot reform at the right time, it will lose the opportunity for development. Do you estimate how much tax Greece can raise every year after the reform of the tax system? Constantine asked. If the reform of the taxation department is quicker, the tax revenue this year can be 50 million drachmas more than under the equal taxation system, Alexandros said happily. As the Greek economy developed rapidly after the war, this number will continue to grow rapidly after the government repays the UK's due foreign debt. In addition to the military expenditure allocated to the army, the government will invest the rest of the funds in the Albanian region. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.